The first thing Scott Summers felt was the change in the air. One moment, he was in a cold room with bright lights and alarms. The next, the floor stopped being a floor. It turned into a thin sheet of glowing cracks, like a broken window laid flat. The light crawled up his boots. It climbed his legs. It climbed his chest. "Back," he shouted, but the sound got pulled away, like the world was swallowing it. Scott reached for John's hand. His fingers brushed her glove. Then the room dropped out from under them. They fell. Not down a shaft, not down stairs. They fell through a hole in reality. Wind hit Scott's face. City noise hit his ears. Heat hit his skin. The smell of smoke and perfume and hot street food hit at once. They slammed onto hard pavement. Scott rolled, caught himself, and snapped his head up. Bright stage lights blinded him. Giant screens towered overhead. A crowd of thousands screamed and cheered. A red carpet ran right past them. Behind it, a huge sign glittered in gold. Vought International. Scott's heart sank. This was not their world. He saw Logan on one knee, already scanning for threats, shoulders tense like a wolf that heard a trap click. Aurora was upright, calm in a way that made Scott breathe again. Hank pushed himself up with a groan, glasses still on somehow. Rogue stood half behind Aurora, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Jean's face was tight, like she could feel the whole crowd at once. And the crowd? They were pointing phones at them. "Is this part of the show?" someone yelled. "New soups!" someone screamed. A man in a shiny suit ran toward them, smiling too hard. A headset sat on his ear. "Fantastic entrance," he said. "Amazing. We love surprises. Quick thing, just quick. Can you sign the appearance release forms before?" A security guard shoved past him with a rifle raised. Scott saw the guard's finger tighten. Scott's visor tilted. A red beam snapped out, clean and controlled, hitting the ground in front of the rifle. The blast cracked the pavement and kicked up a wall of dust and shattered stone. The guard stumbled back, terrified. The crowd screamed. Phones went higher. Scott hated that. He hated the cameras more than the gun. "Everyone move back!" Scott shouted, voice loud, sharp, trained. "Get behind cover!" People didn't know what cover meant here. They ran the wrong way. They tripped. They pushed. Aurora stepped forward. Her white hair lifted, not from wind, but from power. The air shifted around the crowd. It didn't become a storm. It became order. A steady gust pushed people away from the danger without knocking them down. It guided them toward side exits, toward open space, away from the gun line. A second guard fired anyway. Jean's hand lifted. The bullet stopped in midair. Scott saw them hang there like tiny metal dots. Then they dropped straight down, harmless, clinking on the ground. The crowd went silent for half a second. Then the screaming doubled. Somebody shouted, "That one's a mind soup!" Rogue's jaw tightened. Logan's claws slid out with that sharp metal sound that made people flinch even before they understood what it was. Scott put a hand out toward Logan without looking. "Not unless we have to." Logan didn't answer. He just breathed through his nose, eyes narrowed. He watched the security line like it insulted him. Then the sky above the stage boomed. Not thunder. Something else. The crowd looked up as one. A man floated down from above the screens, cape barely moving. Like gravity was a suggestion he chose to ignore. He landed on the stage like it belonged to him. He smiled at the cameras. It was a perfect smile. Scott knew that smile. Not the face, not the name, but the type. A powerful person who wanted to be loved. The man's eyes moved over Scott's team like he was counting them. Then he spoke, voice carrying over the speakers, even though he wasn't near a mic. "Well," he said, almost cheerful, "this is new." He turned his head slightly, like he was listening to someone in an earpiece. Then his smile sharpened. "And this," he said, "is not authorized." Jane's eyes flicked to him. She didn't move her head. Scott felt her tension, like a wire pulled tight. Aurora's face stayed calm, but her posture shifted. "Ready?" Scott stepped forward, palms open, trying to control the moment. "We're not here to hurt anyone," Scott said. "We don't know where we are. But we can talk." The floating man laughed, soft and short. "You can talk," he said. "Sure." He hovered forward just a little, enough to make the crowd gasp. "But you don't get to show up in my city, on my stage, in front of my people and scare them." His eyes focused on Scott's visor. "Take that off," he said, like it was a simple request. Scott didn't. He couldn't. Jean's fingers twitched. Scott felt her mind brush the air around the man, just a light touch, like testing the temperature of water. John flinched, not because she was hurt, because of what she felt. The floating man noticed her reaction instantly. His smile stayed, but it became thinner. For 1 second, the stage lights flickered. The big screens behind him switched to a breaking news banner. A woman's voice blared from the speakers, urgent and excited. "We are live. Unknown. Super team attacks VOD event. Possible terror incident." Scott stared at the screens. Under the headline, they looped a clip. It showed his optic blast. But the clip cut out the guard raising his rifle first. It made it look like Scott attacked for no reason. The crowd began to chant, confused and angry, as if the screen told them what to feel. "Invaders!" Scott's stomach dropped. This world didn't just have heroes. It had a machine. And the machine had already decided what the story was. Huey Campbell watched the clip for the 4th time and hated it more each time. It played on every screen, in the safe house living room. A bright VOD anchor with perfect hair pointed at paused footage like it was a school lesson. "Look here," she said. "The red beam soup initiates aggression." "That's not what happened," Huey said out loud. Butcher, sitting on the couch like he owned it, didn't look away from the screen. "Doesn't matter what happened," Butcher said. "Matters what they sell." Mother's Milk leaned against the wall, arms crossed, eyes tired. "They're calling it an invasion," said. "VOD don't pick words by accident." Frenchie was on the floor, cleaning something that looked illegal. Kimiko sat near him, silent, eyes on the TV, face unreadable. Starlight stood by the window, half in shadow. She looked like she wanted to punch the screen. Huey looked at her. "You think they're lying?" Starlight didn't answer right away. Her voice came out small. "I was there," she said. "Not close, but I saw the crowd. I saw VOD security, and I saw them." Butcher finally turned his head. "Them," he repeated, like the word tasted bad. Starlight's eyes stayed on the TV. "They moved people away," she said. "First thing they did. They didn't pose. They didn't smile. They didn't—" She swallowed. "They weren't like us." Butcher gave a humorless grin. "Everyone's a hero until they're not." Held up a hand, stopping the argument before it grew teeth. "Either way," said, "VOD is gonna hunt them. And if those people are powerful, this city becomes a war zone." Huey kept staring at the paused frame. 6 strangers, caught mid-motion. The man with the visor standing like a soldier. The woman with white hair holding the air itself steady. A scary-looking blue guy with glasses. A tough woman with a leather jacket. A red-haired woman whose eyes looked too calm. And a short, stocky man with claws. Huey felt a weird thing in his chest. Not fear, hope. And hope was dangerous here. Stan Edgar watched the same footage in a room that was too clean to feel real. The wall screens were bigger than the safe house TV. The sound was crisp. The slow motion was perfect. He sat at the head of a long table. Executives and analysts sat around him like nervous birds. No one dared talk over the video. When it ended, he didn't clap. He didn't sigh. He simply looked at a woman with a tablet. "Threat assessment," Edgar said. The woman swallowed. "The visor subject displays controlled energy projection. The red-haired subject, we suspect telekinesis and possibly telepathy. The white-haired subject affects weather patterns. The clawed subject appears to have a healing factor and enhanced aggression." Edgar's eyes stayed calm. "And the public narrative?" he asked. A man in a suit leaned forward. "We've already labeled them as foreign soups, illegal, terror-connected. We can push invasion hard." Edgar nodded once. "And our heroes?" he asked, like he was asking about an inventory list. Another analyst tapped a screen. "Homelander has responded. The 7 are on standby. Black Noir is ready for retrieval operations." Edgar's mouth didn't change. "Good," he said. One executive, too brave or too stupid, cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, "if these are not V-enhanced, we may be dealing with something else." Edgar turned his eyes to the executive. "Of course it is something else," Edgar said softly. "That is why it is valuable." He stood. "Find where they landed," Edgar said. "Track the energy. Track the people who talk to them. Track the people who help them." He walked toward the door, hands clasped behind his back. "And," he added, "prepare the paperwork." A few people laughed, nervous, like they understood it was a joke. Edgar didn't smile. It wasn't a joke. Scott kept his team moving. They didn't go down open streets. They didn't stay near crowds. They didn't linger near cameras. Hank found a service tunnel entrance behind a closed restaurant and picked the lock with a hairpin he absolutely did not admit he carried. They moved fast and quiet through dim concrete halls that smelled like wet dust. Jean helped by feeling the mines above them, light touches, just enough to avoid groups. Aurora kept the air cool around them, not dramatic, just enough to keep sweat from making them sloppy. Logan kept looking back. "Someone's following," Logan muttered. Scott listened. He didn't hear footsteps, but he trusted Logan's instincts. "Keep going," Scott said. They reached a maintenance room with a broken door and no cameras on the ceiling. Hank checked the corner, nodded once. "Good enough," Hank said. Rogue leaned against the wall, arms folded, jaw set. "So," she said, voice rough, "where the hell are we?" Scott looked at Jean. Jean's eyes were unfocused, like she was still feeling that man's mind. "Not our world," Jean said quietly. Logan snorted. "Yeah, no kidding." Aurora stepped closer, calm in the way she always was after chaos. "Scott," she said, "that man in the sky, he is not a normal leader." Scott knew. In their world, they dealt with powerful people all the time. But this felt different. This felt like power wrapped in a costume and sold like a toy. Hank pulled out a small device from his belt. It was cracked from the fall. He tapped it anyway. "No signal," Hank said. "No familiar satellites. No Xavier. No comms." Rogue's eyes flashed. "So we're stuck." Scott took a breath. "Not stuck," Scott said. "Stranded." Jean finally met his eyes. "And hunted," she added. Scott nodded. He looked at each of them. "We keep civilians safe," Scott said. "We gather intel. We find out what caused the rift. We figure out how to reopen it." Logan's claws slid out again with a soft click. "And if that flying psycho comes back?" Logan asked. Scott didn't flinch. "Then we handle it," he said. Aurora's voice stayed calm. "We do not start a war." Logan's eyes stayed hard. "War's already started," he said. "They put it on the screens." Jean wrapped her arms around herself like she was holding in something cold. "He's unstable," she said. "The flying one." Rogue looked at her. "How you know?" Jean hesitated. Scott knew she didn't like talking about mines. Not like this. "I touched the surface," June said. "Just the surface. It was loud." Scott understood. Loud meant fear. Loud meant anger. Loud meant a person who could break a city because he felt small for 1 second. Hank cleared his throat, forcing the room back to logic. "We need a name," Hank said. "Not for us. For him. For the company." Rogue pointed her chin upward. "That sign. Vought." Scott nodded. "Then Vought is our first problem," Scott said. A metal door creaked somewhere down the hall. Logan's head snapped. "Told you," he muttered. Scott raised a hand. Everyone went still. Voices echoed faintly. Not police, not soldiers. Regular people, whispering, moving carefully. Scott stepped toward the door and cracked it open. He saw a group at the end of the hall, flashlights low, weapons up. A big man with steady eyes. A smaller guy with scared energy. A woman who looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. A man with messy hair. And a silent woman who moved like a blade. They froze when they saw Scott. The smaller guy lifted his hands halfway, like he didn't know what to do with them. The big man spoke first. "We're not Vought." Scott didn't lower his guard. "Then who are you?" Scott asked. The man with messy hair smiled like a bad idea. "The people who hate soups," he said. "Welcome to the worst world you could have landed in." Huey's mouth went dry when the visor guy opened the door. Up close, he looked older than Huey expected. Not old, just tired. Like someone who carried too much responsibility. The claw guy behind him looked like pure danger, even standing still. Huey's brain screamed at him to back up. Butcher stepped forward like he wanted the fight. "Easy," MM warned. Low. Starlight stared at the strangers, eyes wide. She saw their faces, the way they stood. No posing, no checking for cameras, no fake grin. The visor guy's voice stayed calm. "You're armed," he said. Butcher lifted his gun a little higher. "So are you," he said, nodding at the claws. The claw guy's eyes narrowed. "You want to test that theory, pal?" The woman with white hair stepped forward 1 pace. It didn't look threatening. But the air felt different, like the room itself paid attention to her. "Please," she said, voice steady. "We do not want to fight." Huey realized something. It hit him hard. This was the first time he'd heard a super say that and mean it. Butcher spat to the side. "They always say that." Starlight snapped. "Not like this." The red-haired woman's gaze flicked to Starlight, quick and sharp, like she saw a crack inside her. Jean looked away first. That scared Huey more than anything. The blue guy with glasses took 1 step forward and lifted both hands in a friendly gesture. "Hello," he said, too polite for the setting. "We seem to have fallen into a complicated environment. I'm Dr. McCoy." Butcher raised an eyebrow. "Doctor? What, like you got a PhD in being blue?" The blue man smiled a little. "Several, actually." Huey almost laughed, and then realized how insane that was. Visor guy glanced at his team, then back at MM. "We need information," he said. "We also need to not be on camera." MM nodded once. "Then you need us," he said. Butcher scoffed. "Or they kill us," he said. "Either way, we're involved now." The claw guy leaned in slightly, eyes locked on Butcher like a dare. "Try it," he said. Visor guy didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Logan," he said. The claw guy's jaw tightened, but the claws slid back in. Huey blinked. That one word did more than any gun in the room. "Okay," Huey said, surprising even himself. "Okay. We can talk. We can—" Butcher cut him off. "Name," he said to Visor guy. "Give us a name." Visor guy hesitated, just for a beat. Huey saw it, like giving his name was giving a weapon away. "My name is Scott," he said, "and we didn't invade anything." Butcher grinned like a shark. "Scott," he repeated. "Right. Well, Scott." Welcome to America's favorite nightmare. They moved again, this time together, because nobody in that hallway could stay long. led them through side tunnels and out into a service garage where an old van waited. It looked like it had been fixed, hit again, and fixed again. "Get in," Butcher said, like a command. Logan climbed in last, eyes scanning the street through the cracked rear window. Inside the van, Huey sat too close to the blue guy, which felt weird because the blue guy smelled like clean soap and books. Starlight sat across from the white-haired woman, eyes cautious. Aurora met her gaze. Calm. Not judging. Huey wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Who are you? Where are you from? Why do you look like real heroes? But Butcher started with the only question he cared about. You can kill Homelander? Butcher asked. The van went quiet. Scott's head turned slowly. We don't know who that is, Scott said. Butcher blinked, then laughed once. Oh, you're gonna learn, he said. Jean stared at the van floor. Huey saw her hands clenched. Kept his eyes on the road. You don't want to meet him, said, but you already did. Logan's voice was low. Flying guy, he said. Yeah. Hank leaned forward, interested despite the danger. Who is he? Hank asked, like he was asking about a new species. Starlight's mouth tightened. His name is Homelander, she said. He's the strongest soup in the world. Scott didn't flinch. Strongest doesn't mean right, Scott said. Butcher gave a bitter laugh. In this world, Butcher said, strongest means untouchable. Aurora's voice stayed even. Nothing is untouchable, she said. Only protected. Huey felt that line hit him like a truth he'd been trying to avoid. Protected by money. Protected by cameras. Protected by fear. The van turned. Neon lights flashed past the windows. Posters with perfect faces smiled down at them from buildings. Huey saw the faces of the 7 everywhere. Then he saw a screen showing the strangers again. Unknown soup still at large, the banner screamed. A Vought hotline number appeared. A reward. Scott watched it, jaw tight. Your world hunts people like us? Huey asked him. Scott looked at him. His eyes were tired, but steady. Some do, Scott said. Some fear what they don't understand. Some hate what they can't control. Butcher muttered, sounds familiar. Jean finally spoke, soft and sharp. They control the story here, she said. Starlight looked out the window. Yeah, she said. They do. Hank adjusted his glasses. Then we must avoid cameras, he said, and avoid giving them more material. Butcher grinned again. Too late, he said. They already got your greatest hits. MM's voice stayed calm, but it carried weight. We need a plan, said, because Vought is going to come, and they're going to come fast. Scott nodded. Then we plan, he said. Logan snorted. And when the plan fails, he said, we fight. Scott didn't argue with that. He just said, we fight smart. Homelander watched them on a screen that was designed to make him feel like a god. The room was private. No cameras, no fans, no fake smiles. Only him and a screen full of paused frames. He stood close enough that his breath fogged the glass. 6 strangers. The one with the visor. Military posture. Commanding presence. The white-haired woman. Calm. Too calm. Like she wasn't impressed. The red-haired woman. Her eyes bothered him. She looked like she could see through him. Homelander's jaw tightened. He remembered her touch. Not a shove. Not a punch. A touch. Like someone knocking gently on a door he didn't know was there. His smile twitched. Then his eyes flashed hot. The screen cracked. A tech in the corner flinched and looked away. Homelander forced himself to breathe. He didn't want to be angry. Not yet. Anger looked bad on camera. He turned slightly. "Where are they?" he asked, voice calm, too calm. A Vought handler swallowed. "We have teams searching, sir. Edgar has initiated—" Homelander's head snapped. "Don't say his name like he's in charge of me," Homelander said. The handler's face went pale. "Yes, sir." Homelander stared at the cracked screen again. "They came into my world," he said softly. "Into my city." He leaned closer to the image of Scott's visor. And they didn't bow. His eyes narrowed. "So," he whispered, "we teach them." Then he straightened, smile returning like a mask sliding into place. "And we do it," he said, "where everyone can see." The safe place the boys took them to was not safe in any comforting way. It was a grimy back room above a closed-down store. The windows were covered. The air smelled like old coffee and metal. But it had one thing Scott needed. No cameras. Hank immediately began checking the walls for listening devices. Frenchie watched with interest and a little jealousy, like someone seeing another craftsman at work. "You are like Professor of Sneaking," Frenchie said. Hank smiled politely. "I assure you, I am far more of a professor of genetics. But yes, I have hobbies." Logan muttered. "Hobbies. He means breaking into places." Huey sat at a table across from Scott, trying not to stare at the visor. He finally failed. "So," Huey said, "is the visor like a style thing, or—" Scott cut him off gently. "It helps me control my power," he said. Huey nodded fast. "Right. Cool. Not cool. I mean, it's cool, but—" Butcher leaned on a counter. "Show us," he said. Scott's head turned. "No." Butcher's grin widened. "Scared you'll miss." Scott's voice stayed flat. "Scared I'll hit something I didn't mean to." That shut Butcher up for half a second. Aurora watched the room, watching the people. She saw the way Starlight held herself like she expected to be judged. She saw the way MM kept checking exits. She saw the way Huey kept glancing at his friends, like he needed their faces to stay real. This world carried fear like a daily habit. Aurora spoke softly. "What is Vought?" she asked. MM answered. "A company," he said. "A monster," he added, because one word wasn't enough. Starlight sat down hard. "They own superheroes," she said. "They own the media. They own the police when it matters. They sell hope and they sell fear." Rogue's eyes narrowed. "They own people like us," she said, like she was tasting the idea and hating it. Butcher's voice was sharp. "They made soups," he said. "Not born. Made. With a drug." Hank's eyebrows lifted. "Artificial enhancement," he murmured, mind already running. Jean's voice was quiet. "And you're fighting them?" Huey swallowed. "We're trying," he said. Scott listened to it all like he was building a map in his mind. "Then we have the same enemy," Scott said. Butcher laughed. "Do we?" he asked. "Because you lot look like soups," Rogue bristled. "We're not your soups," she snapped. Logan stepped forward a little, eyes on Butcher. "Say it again," Logan said. Scott raised a hand again. "Enough," he said. Butcher tilted his head. "That's your thing, yeah?" he asked Scott. "Boss voice. Keeps the animals in line." Scott's eyes stayed level. "They're not animals," Scott said. "They're my team." Butcher's grin faded. Just a little. Aurora watched that. It mattered. In a world like this, a leader who cared about his people was dangerous. Hank cleared his throat. "We need practical information," Hank said. "We need to understand the physics of this universe, the technology, the energy profile that brought us here." Frenchie perked up. "Oh, you want the science," he said. Yes. This I like." Kimiko, silent until now, stepped closer to John. Her eyes searched John's face. John met her gaze. Kimiko pointed to her own head, then to John. John's expression softened. You want to know if I can read you? John said. Kimiko nodded once. John shook her head slowly. I won't, she said. Not unless you ask. Kimiko blinked, surprised. Then she nodded again. Slower. Starlight saw that and felt something twist inside her. Consent. Respect. Simple things. Things she didn't get to have. Spoke again. Practical. Vought will be hunting you, he said. They'll use drones, cameras. They'll use soups. They'll use regular people too. Rewards. Fear. Scott nodded. We can handle being hunted, he said. Butcher snorted. No, you can handle fighting, he corrected. Being hunted here is different. Here, they make you the villain first. Then anyone can shoot you and call it heroic. Jean's jaw tightened. They already started, she said. Huey leaned forward. Why are you here? He asked, voice small. Like, what happened? Scott's eyes lowered for a moment, then lifted. We were responding to an energy event, Scott said. It tore open. We tried to stabilize it. It took us, Hank added. It appears to be a type of dimensional rupture, a rift between realities. Not magic. Not exactly. More like a seam tearing. Rogue crossed her arms. Can you fix it? She asked Hank. Hank hesitated. Maybe, he said honestly, but not without equipment, not without time, and not while we are being chased. Logan muttered. So we're stuck. Aurora corrected him gently. We are not trapped, she said. We are here. There is a difference. Starlight stared at Aurora like she was seeing a kind of strength she had forgotten existed. Butcher pushed off the counter. All right, he said. Here's the deal. You lot hide. We figure out what you can do. We figure out how to use it. Scott's voice turned colder. We're not weapons, he said. Butcher smiled. Everyone's a weapon, he said. Some just pretend they're not. Stepped between them before it became a fight. We're not doing this, said. Not like that. Huey looked at Scott. We can help you stay off cameras, he said. We know the blind spots. We know the places Vought doesn't care about. Scott considered that. He didn't like needing anyone, but he also didn't like being reckless. We'll work together, Scott said. For now. But you don't control us. Butcher opened his mouth. Aurora's voice cut in, calm but firm. And we didn't kill to prove a point, she said. Butcher stared at her. Something in her eyes made him look away first. Fine, Butcher said, like the word cost him. Hank pulled a notebook out and began writing, because Hank wrote when he needed control. Frenchie leaned over his shoulder. You write like a lawyer, Frenchie said. Hank frowned. I have been told that many times, he said. Frenchie grinned. In this world, that will get you killed. Hank looked up. Then I shall have to be careful, Logan snorted. Careful ain't gonna save you, he said. Scott turned to Jean. Can you sense anything? He asked. Any trace of the rift? Jean closed her eyes. She reached, not for thoughts, but for that strange feeling, like a door left open in the air. Her face tightened. There's residue, she said. Like an echo. Faint. But it's here. Hank's head lifted. Where? Jean opened her eyes. Near the event site, she said. And other places too. Small flickers. Scott's mind snapped into action. Then it can happen again, Scott said. MM's expression darkened. That means more trouble, he said. Butcher's grin came back, slow. Or more opportunity, he said. Starlight's voice was sharp. Shut up, she said. Butcher looked surprised for half a second, then amused. Aurora watched Starlight again. This one still had a spine. Good. Scott stood. We need to move, he said. We need a safer base, and we need to understand Vought. Huey nodded too fast. We can take you somewhere, he said. Like really off-grid. Butcher grabbed a bag from the floor and tossed it onto the table. It thumped like it was full of bricks. Scott's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" he asked. Butcher opened the bag. Inside were stacks of paper. Rogue blinked. "Are those forms?" Butcher smiled like he'd done something clever. "Fake IDs," he said. "Fake names, fake addresses. And yes," he added, tapping the papers, "some bloody forms." Hank stared at the paperwork like it was a personal insult. "You carry forms," Hank said, amazed. Butcher shrugged. "This world runs on forms," he said. "You want to survive? You sign the right thing. You don't sign the wrong thing, and you keep a pen handy." Logan grabbed a stack and tore it in half without even looking. Butcher yelled, "Oi!" Logan stared at him. "I don't do paperwork," he said. Hank sighed. "Of course you don't." And in that grimy room, with fear outside and lies on every screen, the smallest thing broke the tension. Huey laughed. Just once. Scott didn't smile, but his shoulders loosened. For now, they were breathing. For now, they had a plan. And somewhere across the city, in a tower of glass and power, the machine was already building a trap. It started with a bus. A city bus accident. Right in a place where cameras were always watching. The bus lay on its side near a crowded intersection. Smoke rose from the engine. People screamed. A man in a hard hat shouted that the fuel would explode. News helicopters circled above like hungry birds. Vought News Network was already live. Huey watched from inside the van, jaw tight. "This is fake," he whispered. Butcher drove with one hand, eyes locked ahead. "Course it's fake," he said. "It's a bait station." MM checked his phone, scanning feeds. "They're timing it," he said. "They want the mystery team to show." Starlight sat in the back, hood up, trying to hide her face. "They know they'll come," she said quietly. Scott sat beside her, listening, watching the street through a small gap in the curtain. "Why?" Scott asked. Starlight's mouth tightened. "Because they know real heroes can't ignore it," she said. Scott's jaw clenched. "Then they're using civilians as a leash," he said. Aurora's eyes were fixed on the smoke in the distance. "They are using fear," she said, "and they are counting on our morals." Rogue crossed her arms. "So we let people die?" she snapped. Scott didn't answer. He didn't need to. He opened the van door. Logan grunted. "Knew it," he said, already moving. Hank grabbed Scott's arm. "Cameras," he warned. Scott nodded. "We do this fast," Scott said. "We do this clean. We do this smart." Jean's eyes closed for a second. "They're watching," she said. Scott looked at his team. "Same rules," he said. "Civilians first." They moved. They didn't sprint down the main street. They used alleys. They cut behind buildings. They came out near the crash from the side, where fewer cameras pointed. But fewer did not mean none. Scott saw phones. He saw lenses. He saw a Vought drone hovering above the smoke, red light blinking. He hated it. Aurora stepped first. The air shifted. The smoke thinned, pulled upward in a controlled column like a chimney. People coughed less. They could see. Rogue ran to the bus, grabbed the top edge with both hands and lifted. The bus was heavy. She made it look like it wasn't. People crawled out, crying, bleeding, shaking. Logan moved like a blur, pulling a trapped child free with claws that never touched skin. Scott stood back, visor aimed, scanning for threats and for weak points. Jean lifted her hand and held the bus steady so Rogue could reposition it without crushing anyone. It was teamwork. Clean, fast, real. And it was exactly what Vought wanted on camera. A man stumbled out of the smoke, arms up, screaming, "Help! Help!" Huey, watching from the alley mouth, felt his stomach twist. The man's scream sounded wrong. It was too timed, too placed. Whispered, "That's not a civilian." The man dropped his hands. A gun appeared. He fired at the crowd. Scott's optic blast snapped out, cutting the bullet path, shattering the gun, throwing the shooter backward without ripping him apart. The shooter hit the pavement and didn't get up. Rogue spun, eyes furious. What the hell? Then the drones dropped. 3 of them at first, then 6, then more. They came down from above the rooftops, sleek metal bodies with Vought logos, arms unfolding like spider legs. They weren't built like normal drones. They were built like cages. Electric nets fired from their sides, not toward the X-Men first, toward civilians. Huey's eyes widened. "There," he started. "They're making it worse," Starlight finished, voice hard. Aurora's face tightened. She lifted both hands. Wind slammed into the drones from the side, pushing them away from the crowd and into a clear space. Scott shouted, "Everyone move! Get behind buildings!" People ran. Phones stayed up. One drone rotated in midair and fired a net at Scott. Scott pivoted, optic blast slicing the net line before it could spread. Another drone fired a shock bolt at Rogue. Jean flicked her wrist. The bolt stopped, hung in midair, and fell like dead light. Hank, standing near the alley, stared at the drone design. "Interesting," he muttered, as if he couldn't help himself. Composite plating, flexible joints, likely adaptive targeting. Butcher grabbed Hank's shoulder. "Professor," Butcher snapped, "now is not the time to admire the trap." Hank blinked. "I'm not admiring," he said. "I'm cataloging." Logan lunged at a drone that dipped too low. His claws punched into metal. The drone shrieked like machinery grinding itself apart. Logan tore it open. Sparks burst. The drone crashed to the street. Cameras caught it. Vought would love that. "Careful," Scott shouted. Logan didn't look back. "Tell the drones," he shouted back, and then the air changed again. Not Aurora's air. A shadow fell over the intersection. Huey looked up. Homelander was there. He hovered above the scene like a statue that decided to move. His cape fluttered just enough to look dramatic. His smile was wide. He spoke loudly, for the mics and the cameras. "Don't worry, everyone," Homelander said. "I'm here." Huey's skin crawled. Homelander's eyes swept the scene, landing on each stranger, measuring, judging. He pointed at Scott like he was pointing at a criminal. "You," Homelander said, voice still bright. "You're endangering people." Scott stepped forward, keeping his body between Homelander and the crowd. "We're saving people," Scott said, voice controlled. Homelander laughed softly. "Oh, I love it," he said. "The speech, the moral high ground." He drifted down a little, boots still off the ground. "Let's make this simple," Homelander said. "You surrender. You come with me. Vought will give you a fair hearing." Rogue hissed, "Like hell." Aurora's eyes narrowed. Jean's face was tight, but calm. Scott didn't move. "No," Scott said. Homelander's smile stayed, but something behind it snapped. "You don't get to say no to me," Homelander said quietly now. The cameras zoomed in. Vought wanted a fight. Homelander wanted control. Scott wanted civilians alive. Those 3 wants did not fit together. Homelander moved first. He didn't charge like a bull. He moved like a bullet. He was in front of Scott in an instant, fist swinging. Scott's visor angled down. A blast hit the street between them, not Homelander. The shockwave threw dust up, forcing distance, forcing space. Homelander slid back in the air, annoyed. "Oh," he said, loud again. "So you're the laser guy." Scott's voice stayed sharp. "My eyes aren't a show," he said. Homelander's eyes glowed red. Jean's hand lifted instantly, not aggressive, defensive. Homelander's heat vision fired. Jean caught it, not by absorbing it like a sponge, by bending it. The red beam curved upward, carving a clean line through a billboard instead of through people. The crowd screamed again. Homelander's eyes widened for half a second. Then his grin came back, meaner. "Okay," he said. "That's new." Aurora lifted one hand. The wind hit Homelander from below like a rising wall. It didn't throw him across the city. He was too strong for that. But it forced him to brace. It forced him to stop acting like gravity didn't exist. Lightning cracked in the sky. Not a wild storm, a precise strike. It hit the air near Homelander's shoulder, close enough to make him flinch, far enough to not hit a civilian. Homelander's head snapped toward Aurora. His smile faded. "You," he said, like he didn't like being surprised. Aurora's voice was calm. "Leave," she said. Homelander laughed once, sharp. "You think you can tell me to leave my own country?" Scott's brain ran through tactics fast. Homelander was strong, very strong, but he was also performing. That was a weakness. Scott shouted, "Hank!" Hank looked up. "Yes?" "Get people out of here," Scott said. "Use the alleys. Cover the exits." MM and Huey were already moving, waving civilians, pulling them toward side streets. Starlight stepped into view and threw a burst of light that blinded one of the drones long enough for people to run. Homelander saw Starlight. His face changed. Not on camera. He kept his smile. But his eyes said, "Later." Scott saw it too. John saw it and stiffened. Homelander looked back at Scott. "You're making me look bad," Homelander said softly. Scott didn't answer. He aimed his visor at the drones instead of Homelander and fired 2 clean blasts. 2 drones fell smoking. Vought would frame it as violence, but it kept the nets off the crowd. Homelander snapped. Uwaiko flew upward fast, then dropped straight down toward Scott like a hammer. Scott fired a blast at the ground again, using the shock to throw himself sideways. Homelander hit the street, cracking it. Cars bounced. People screamed. Aurora slammed a gust of wind between the crowd and the impact point, keeping debris from slicing into bodies. Jean lifted broken chunks of pavement with her mind and held them in the air like a shield wall, stopping flying rocks. Logan sprinted in and slashed at Homelander's side, not because he thought he'd win a power contest, but because Logan was Logan. Homelander caught Logan by the throat. He lifted him off the ground with one hand. Logan's boots kicked once, then he grinned through clenched teeth. "Yeah," Logan rasped. "You're real popular, huh?" Homelander's eyes blazed. Scott's body tensed. Jean's hand lifted higher. Aurora's face tightened. This was the moment where Homelander could choose. He could rip Logan apart on live TV, or he could stay the hero in the story he sold. Homelander's jaw clenched. His gaze flicked to the cameras, to the phones, to the helicopter above. He released Logan like he was dropping trash. Logan hit the street, rolled, popped back up, healing already. Homelander spoke louder, for the crowd. "See?" he said. "I'm trying to be reasonable." Jean's eyes narrowed. She felt the lie like a bad smell. She reached again. Not deep, not cruel, just enough to see the shape of what he was about to do. She saw a spike of anger and a plan to turn this into a public execution without looking like one. John acted fast. Her telekinesis hit Homelander like an invisible hand pressing on his chest. Not crushing, not breaking, pinning. Homelander froze in midair, arms spread slightly, like someone had paused him. The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed. Homelander's face flashed with panic for one sharp second. Then rage. He fought it. His muscles strained. He was strong enough that Jean couldn't hold him forever, not without hurting herself or losing control. But she didn't need forever. She needed time. Scott shouted, "Move! Everyone move!" Aurora's wind shoved the last civilians out of the intersection. Rogue grabbed 2 injured people and carried them into an alley. Hank ran to a fallen drone and yanked out a blinking module, stuffing it in his pocket. Butcher stared at Homelander pinned in the air. His eyes shone with a sick kind of joy. "Do it," Butcher whispered. Jean heard him. She didn't look at him, but her voice cut like ice. "No," she said. Homelander's eyes flicked toward Jean. He smiled, even while pinned. "You're inside my head," he said, voice strained, still loud enough for a mic to catch. "That's illegal." Joan's face didn't change. "So is murder," she said. Homelander's smile twitched. He pushed harder. Jean's breath hitched. Scott made a decision. He fired an optic blast at the street in front of Homelander, not at him. The blast blew up a thick wall of dust and broken pavement, creating a temporary curtain between Homelander and the cameras. Aurora made the dust spread wider, hiding sight lines. June released her hold the moment the visual cover existed. Homelander shot forward, furious, ready to chase, and slammed into a sudden wall of wind that Aurora made in front of him like a moving barrier. It didn't stop him forever, but it slowed him. It forced him to fight the air. Scott's voice was sharp. "Fall back." They moved. Fast, not running in a line, splitting, turning, rejoining. A team that had done this before. Homelander broke through the wind wall with brute force, cape snapping. He rose above the dust cloud and scanned. His eyes glowed red, sweeping the streets. But he couldn't just laser the whole block. Not with cameras watching. Not with civilians still nearby. Not while Vogt needed him clean. He hovered, chest rising and falling. Then he forced his smile back on. He turned to the cameras. "These invaders are dangerous," Homelander announced. "They attacked civilians. They attacked Vogt security. They attacked me." In the alley, Huey heard it and wanted to throw up. Starlight's fists clenched until her knuckles went white. Butcher laughed quietly, like a man enjoying the start of a fire. Scott didn't stop moving until they were deep in back streets again. They regrouped under a bridge where the sound of traffic above covered their breathing. Logan leaned against a pillar, rubbing his throat. "He squeezes like a truck," Logan muttered. Rogue glared at him. "You jumped at him," she said. Logan shrugged. "Yeah," he said. "Had to see." Jean's face was pale. She looked at her hands like they didn't belong to her. Aurora stepped close. "Are you all right?" she asked gently. Jean nodded once. "He's worse than I thought," she whispered. Scott stared at the street beyond the bridge, where sirens wailed and helicopters circled. "They wanted that fight," Scott said. MM nodded. "Yeah," he said. "And now, the whole world knows you're real." Hank pulled the stolen drone module out and turned it over in his hands, eyes focused. "This technology," Hank murmured. "It's designed to restrain powered individuals. It's crude compared to what we've seen at home, but it's mass-produced, and it's improving." Butcher leaned in. "Can you break it?" he asked. Hank looked up. "Yes," he said. "But the better question is—" Jean interrupted, voice tight. "The rift," she said. "It spiked during the fight." Scott turned to her. "You felt it?" Joan nodded. "Like a pulse," she said. "Like something heard us." Aurora's eyes lifted to the gray sky between buildings. "Or something found our trail," she said. A low vibration rolled through the air, so faint most people would miss it. Scott felt it in his teeth. Hank's device, the cracked one he kept tapping out of habit, suddenly blinked once, just once. Then it went dark again. Hank stared at it, eyes wide behind his glasses. "That shouldn't happen," he whispered. Logan's head snapped up. "Someone's coming," Logan said. Not a guess, a fact. Scott tightened his fists. He looked at his team, then at the people beside them. Humans who fought monsters with grit and dirty tricks. The world above them screamed invasion on every screen. And somewhere, beyond sight, the seam between worlds was tearing again. This time, it didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a reply. The next morning, Scott woke up to his own face on a screen. Not his real face. His visor hid it. But Vought had found a way to turn even that into a symbol. A looping clip played on a cheap TV in the safe house. The camera angle was low. It made Scott look taller. Meaner. It cropped out the gun that started everything. It cut out the bullets that Jean stopped. It cut out Aurora pushing the crowd to safety. It kept the dust and the scream. It kept Logan's claws. The headline at the bottom of the screen was simple and loud. Invaders at large. Scott stared at it with a tight jaw. He felt the old anger in his chest. Not the kind that made him want to blast a wall. The kind that made him want to do everything right in a world that punished right. Across the room, Huey sat on the floor with his back against a cabinet. He looked like he hadn't slept. He kept rubbing his hands together like he was trying to erase the night. Butcher stood near the covered window, peeking through a crack like a man watching for the end of the world. Sat at the table, calm on the outside, tired underneath. Frenchie cleaned parts with quick, neat motions. Kimiko watched the TV like she was memorizing it. Starlight had her arms folded. Her eyes were fixed on a different screen, her phone scrolling through comments. Scott didn't want to see them. He didn't need to. He could guess. Monsters. Terrorists. Freaks. Jean sat on a chair with her knees pulled close, fingers linked. She kept her gaze down. Scott could tell she was listening anyway. Not to the TV, to the world, to the noise of minds outside. Aurora stood near the sink, quiet and steady. Her calm was not denial, it was control. Hank sat on the floor with the stolen drone module taken apart in front of him. He had made a little ring of screws and wires like he was building order out of chaos. Logan was by the door, arms crossed, eyes half-lidded, pretending he wasn't on guard. Scott clicked the TV off. The sudden silence made Huey jump. "We can't keep watching that," Scott said. His voice was firm, not angry. "It's not information, it's bait." Butcher didn't look away from the window. "It's the world," he said. "World runs on bait." Exhaled. "There's more," he said, pushing his phone across the table. Scott looked. A live stream showed a press conference. Bright lights. Vought logo behind a podium. A smiling man in a suit spoke like he was comforting children. "Vought International takes this threat seriously," the man said. "We urge all citizens to stay calm. If you see any of these unknown super-terrorists, do not approach. Call the hotline." A poster appeared beside him. 6 silhouettes. 6 wanted icons. Scott's hand tightened around the phone. The man continued. "Homelander and the 7 are working directly with federal partners." Scott looked up at Starlight. She swallowed and looked away. "They didn't ask me," she said quietly. "They just say my name." Butcher chuckled. "That's the deal. You're a logo, not a person." Starlight's eyes flashed. "I know what I am," she snapped. Aurora spoke gently, cutting the tension before it grew teeth. "And what are they calling us?" she asked. Huey answered because his mouth moved faster than his fear. "Invaders," he said. "Foreign soups. Terror cell. Some people are calling you mutants." Hank's head lifted. "Interesting," he murmured. They found the correct word by accident. Rogue's lips curled. "They're calling us freaks with a nicer name," she said. Jean's voice was small. "They're afraid," she said, "and they're being told exactly where to aim it." Scott slid the phone back across the table. "We need a plan," he said. "We can't fight their cameras. Not head on." Butcher pushed off the window and paced. You can fight their god, he said, voice low and sharp. That's the plan. Scott turned to face him fully. No, he said. Butcher stopped. No. Scott's visor pointed at Butcher like a spotlight. We don't execute people, Scott said. We don't pick a target and call it justice because we hate him. Butcher's smile was thin. He's not a person, mate. He's a problem. Aurora's voice stayed calm, but it held weight. He is a person, she said. That is why he is dangerous. Logan snorted. He's a person who likes crushing people, he said. I don't lose sleep over that. Jean flinched at Logan's tone, not because she disagreed, but because she knew what that path did to a team. It ate you from the inside. Rubbed his face. Listen, he said. You lot got rules. We get it. But Vought doesn't. Homelander doesn't. If you keep saving people on camera, they'll twist it. If you don't save people, they'll still twist it. But people die. Scott nodded once. That was the trap. Hank held up a small circuit board. We may not win the story, he said, but we can learn how the story is made. Butcher frowned. Speak English, Blue. Hank's lips twitched. The drones, Hank said. The nets, the tracking, the communications. If I can understand their systems, I can help us avoid them. Or interrupt them. Frenchie leaned in, interested. Ah, he said. Sabotage. Hank adjusted his glasses. Yes, he said. But polite sabotage. Kimiko made a small sound that could have been a laugh. Starlight put her phone down. There's something else, she said. Her voice was careful, like she was stepping on glass. They're making it personal. She slid her phone across. A new clip played. A shaky video. Low light. An alley. A man in a hoodie ran while someone chased him. The camera caught a flash of metal claws. Then the clip cut. Hard. The headline above it screamed, Claws in the dark. Below it, Invaders hunting citizens. Logan's eyes narrowed. That ain't me, he said immediately. Scott believed him. Logan didn't sneak like that. Logan didn't chase a scared civilian for fun. Jean's face tightened. It's staged, she said. Huey's voice cracked. People are buying it. Scott stood very still. His thoughts moved fast. Vought is making us the boogeyman, he said. So any force they use against us looks heroic. Butcher's eyes shone with grim approval. Now you're learning. Scott turned to Jean. Can you find the source? He asked. Where this was filmed? Jean hesitated. Her hands clenched. Maybe, she said. But it's like trying to find one voice in a stadium. Aurora stepped closer to John. Only do what you can, she said softly. We will not break you to win a day. John nodded, grateful and ashamed at the same time. Butcher slapped a stack of papers onto the table like he was laying down a weapon. While you lot do your mind tricks, he said, we do the boring part. Scott looked down. Forms, IDs, fake addresses, fake names. Hank blinked at them like they were poisonous. Butcher pointed. You need to exist on paper, he said. Otherwise you're ghosts, and ghosts get shot. Logan grabbed a sheet and tore it in half again. Butcher shouted, Stop doing that! Logan shrugged. Feels good, he said. Hank sighed. We are being hunted by a corporation, he muttered, and our downfall will be bureaucracy. Scott didn't smile, but a small part of the tightness in his chest loosened. Then June stiffened. Her eyes lifted. She wasn't looking at anyone in the room. She was listening. They're talking about children, she said. The room went quiet. MM's brow furrowed. Who is? June swallowed. Vought, she said. Police scanners, newsrooms, people on phones. Her voice turned colder. They're saying we're taking kids. Rogue's face went hard. What? she snapped. Starlight's mouth tightened. "That's their favorite move," she said quietly. "If they can make you look like you hurt kids, it's over." Scott's stomach dropped. He didn't need Jean to say more. He could already see the next headline. Aurora's voice was steady. "Then we find the truth," she said, "before they bury it." Across the city, Stan Edgar watched the fear spread like a clean math problem. He sat in a glass room above a floor of busy people. They looked small from up here, not because they were weak, but because Edgar had learned how to see them as numbers. Screens showed polls. Screens showed views. Screens showed maps with red dots where people were calling the hotline. A woman to his left spoke quickly. "The narrative is stabilizing. Approval is rising. Fear is up. The public wants protection." Edgar nodded once. "Good." Another man leaned in. "We have forensic teams collecting residue from the street," he said. "Blood, hair, tissue. Anything." Edgar's eyes didn't change. "And?" The man lowered his voice like he was sharing a secret. "It's not Compound V," he said. "It's different." Edgar clasped his hands. "Different," he repeated. "That is what we call opportunity." A third person, nervous, cleared his throat. "Sir," he said, "there is concern. If these subjects are not V-based, our monopoly on power is threatened." Edgar looked at him like a teacher looks at a student who missed the lesson. "A monopoly is not protected by the truth," Edgar said. "It is protected by control." He turned to a screen showing the red-haired woman bending heat vision away from a crowd. "She can do that," Edgar said softly. "And we cannot." He tapped the table once. "So we will learn how." He stood and walked to a different screen. It displayed a clean building with a friendly logo. A rehabilitation clinic. A place for people with special problems. Edgar's voice stayed calm. "If this world can produce abnormal power," he said, "then this world can be harvested." A woman beside him swallowed. "There are reports," she said. "Minor incidents. Children exhibiting unusual traits since the Rift event." Edgar didn't react like it surprised him. It fit. "Bring them in," he said. "But the optics," someone started. Edgar cut him off without raising his voice. "The optics are that we are saving them," he said. "From the invaders." He turned as a door opened behind him. Homelander entered like the room belonged to him. Edgar didn't stand straighter. He didn't smile. He didn't shrink. Homelander's eyes flicked to the screens. "They're still out there," Homelander said. Edgar nodded. "Yes." Homelander leaned closer to the screen showing Scott. "He looked at me like I was normal," Homelander said, voice tight. Edgar's tone stayed flat. "He looked at you like you were accountable," he corrected. Homelander's jaw clenched. Edgar continued, "We are arranging a private contact, a controlled meeting." Homelander's eyes narrowed. "With who?" Edgar's gaze stayed steady. "With their leader," he said. "And their scientist." Homelander scoffed. "Why would we talk?" Edgar's voice was soft. "Because," he said, "if they cannot be killed cleanly, they must be contained." Homelander's eyes glowed faintly, then faded. "Contained," he repeated, like the word offended him. Edgar didn't blink. "Even gods," he said, "benefit from contracts." Homelander smiled, sharp. "I don't sign contracts," he said. Edgar looked at him calmly. "Everyone signs something," he said. "Sometimes with ink, sometimes with consequences." Homelander stared at him for a long beat. Then he turned and left, cape swaying, smile back on like a mask. Edgar watched him go and did not sigh. He simply turned back to the screens. "Prepare the documents," he said again. Scott moved with the boys that night, because staying still meant getting surrounded. They changed safe houses once, then twice. They kept the lights low. They spoke in short bursts. Every time a siren passed, Huey flinched. Jean stayed quiet most of the time, but she kept listening, like she couldn't stop. Aurora stayed near her like a steady wall. Hank worked whenever he could. He had spread the drone pieces out again in the new place, lining them up like bones. Frenchie helped, handing tools, offering weird parts from his own stash. "See?" Frenchie said, holding up a small jammer. "This little baby makes cameras sad." Hank looked at it, impressed despite himself. "Remarkable," he said. "You built that?" Frenchie puffed up. "Of course," he said. "I am a romantic, and also a criminal." Logan muttered, "At least he's honest." Scott stood by a covered window, watching the street through a tiny hole. He saw posters of Homelander smiling down at people. He saw normal people walking under it like it meant safety. He hated that too. MM came up beside him. "You okay?" MM asked. Scott didn't answer right away. Then he said, "In my world, fear makes people vote for bad laws," he said. "Here, fear buys products." MM gave a humorless nod. "Yeah," he said. "Vought sells safety like soda." Butcher's voice cut in from behind them. "You want to win?" he asked Scott. "You take the head off the snake." Scott turned. "And then what?" he asked. Butcher shrugged. "Then the rest is clean up." Aurora stepped in, calm and firm. "No," she said. "Then another snake grows," she added, "because the problem is not one man. It is the system that protects him." Butcher sneered. "So we write a letter?" he snapped. Aurora's eyes didn't change. "We save people," she said, "and we refuse to become what we fight." Butcher opened his mouth. Jean spoke first, quiet but sharp. "They're taking kids," she said. Everyone froze. June's eyes were distant. "I keep hearing it," she said. "Not rumors, real movement. Vans, orders, a place, with bright lights and soft voices." Starlight's face went pale. "That's what?" she whispered. Rogue's fists clenched. "Where?" she demanded. Juan breathed in. "I don't have an address," she said, "but I have a direction." Scott's mind clicked. A path appeared. "Hank," Scott said. Hank looked up, eyebrows raised. "We need a way to find them," Scott said. "Not just vote. The kids. The rift echoes. Anything connected." Hank blinked once. Then his eyes sharpened. "You want a detection system?" he said. "A localized version of Cerebro." Huey frowned. "Siri what?" Hank ignored him. "It would require a stable signal amplifier and a reference point," he said, thinking out loud. "Jean could provide the psychic input. We could use the drone module for frequency mapping. We would need—" Butcher cut in. "You need parts," he said, like he already knew the punchline. He slapped another stack of papers onto the table. "And you need money. And you need fake names." Logan looked down at the papers with disgust. Hank stared at them with the same disgust, but for different reasons. Scott felt the smallest, strangest thing. Relief. A mission. Not a war. Not a public brawl. A mission that made sense for who they were. "Do it," Scott said. Hank nodded once. "I will," he said. Butcher grinned. "And while you're building your mutant radar," he said, "I got a little invitation for you." Scott's visor angled. "From who?" he asked. Butcher tossed a phone onto the table. A message showed a location and a time. Private. No cameras. A note under it. "Vought wants to talk." Scott didn't like it. He didn't trust it. He felt the trap in his bones. But he also knew something else. When the enemy invites you to a table, it's because they couldn't kill you cleanly. He looked at Aurora. She nodded slightly. Scott looked at Jean. She looked sick, but steady. He looked at Logan. Logan's expression said he'd rather bite the table in half than sit at it. Scott took a breath. "We don't go alone," Scott said. Butcher smiled wider. "Oh," he said, "you'll love this part." The meeting place was a clean room, inside a clean building that pretended it wasn't a fortress. Scott walked in with Aurora, Jian, Hank, and Logan. They were dressed in borrowed clothes, hoodies, caps, plain shoes. It didn't matter. The guards still looked at them like they were wild animals that learned to stand upright. But the guards didn't raise guns. Not yet. A woman led them into a glass-walled conference room. A plate of food sat on a table. Bottled water. A stack of papers so thick it looked like a brick. Logan stared at the papers like he wanted to set them on fire. Hank blinked rapidly, offended on principle. Scott ignored the food. He didn't sit. He stood. Then Stan Edgar entered. He didn't look scared. He didn't look excited. He looked like a man arriving at a normal appointment. He nodded once. "Mr. Summers," he said. Scott froze. Aurora's eyes narrowed. Jean's breath caught. Logan's lips curled. "How'd you get his name?" Logan growled. Edgar looked at Logan calmly. "You are not subtle," he said. "None of you are. You are simply unfamiliar with a world that records everything." Scott's voice stayed hard. "What do you want?" he asked. Edgar gestured to the chair. "Please," he said. Scott didn't sit. Edgar didn't mind. He sat instead, folding his hands. "I want to offer you safety," Edgar said. Jean's eyes flicked to the papers. "With a contract," she said. Edgar's mouth didn't move much. "Everything in this world is a contract," he said. Hank stepped forward, voice polite and cold. "And what would you demand in return?" he asked. Edgar nodded as if he respected the question. "Cooperation," he said. "Transparency, registration, controlled public appearances." Aurora's voice was calm. "You want ownership," she said. Edgar looked at her. "I want stability," he corrected. Scott leaned slightly forward. "You called us invaders," he said. "You're taking children," he added, because he watched Edgar's eyes to see if the word landed. It did not. Edgar's tone stayed even. "We are protecting the public," he said. "You are unknown. You are powerful. You did not arrive through legal means." Hank's eyebrows lifted. "Legal means," he repeated, like the phrase was absurd in a multiverse crisis. Edgar slid a folder toward Scott. "Sign," he said, "and you become legal." Logan snorted. "That's not how people work," he said. Edgar looked at him. "That is exactly how people work here," he said. Jean's fingers twitched. Scott could feel her holding herself back. Edgar continued. "You will be given housing, resources, and access to our laboratories. We will assist you in returning to your origin point." Scott's chest tightened. That was the bait. Home. Edgar watched him like he could see the thought. "You want to go back?" Edgar said softly. "I can help." Scott didn't answer right away. He didn't let himself show how much it hurt. Aurora's voice cut through, steady. "If you can help," she said, "then you can stop hunting us. You can stop lying." Edgar didn't blink. "I do not lie," he said. "I manage outcomes." Hank's eyes hardened. "That is a lie with better clothing," he said. Edgar's gaze shifted to Jean. "And you," he said. "You are the one I am most concerned about." Jean didn't flinch. "Because I can hear you," she said. Edgar nodded once. "Because you can change consent," he said. "Because you can erase accountability." Joan's face went cold. "I don't do that," she said. Edgar's tone stayed calm. "Then you are naive," he replied, "or you are lying." Jean's breath caught. Her eyes flashed with anger, then pain. Scott stepped between them slightly. "Enough," he said. Edgar leaned back. "Consider the offer," he said. "I will give you 24 hours. Scott's voice was flat. "And if we refuse?" "If?" he asked. Edgar's eyes stayed steady. Then you remain illegal, he said, and this world will treat you as criminals. Logan's claws slid out. The guards outside the glass shifted. Scott raised a hand, and Logan's claws slid back in with effort. Edgar stood. One more thing, he said. He tapped a remote. A screen on the wall turned on. It showed a child, a little boy, maybe 8, crying in a room with white walls. A man's voice off camera said, "Tell them what happened." The boy sniffed. "The Claw Man," the boy sobbed. "He grabbed me." Scott's stomach turned to ice. Logan growled low, pure threat. Edgar's voice stayed soft. "The world believes children," he said, "especially when it wants to." Scott forced his voice steady. "That's not us," he said. Edgar nodded slowly, as if he was being patient with a liar. "Prove it," he said. Then he walked out. Scott stood in that clean room with the food and the papers and the fake crying child on the screen, and he felt the trap tighten. They weren't just being hunted, they were being framed, and they were being timed. That night, Homelander didn't sleep. He watched the Claw Man clip until he could recite every shake of the camera. He didn't care if it was real. It was useful. He watched his own face on the news, too, talking about safety and duty. He smiled at himself. Then his smile dropped when the clip of June bending his heat vision played again. That one clip bothered him. It made him look challenged. It made him look stoppable. He paced in his private room, fingers flexing. Someone knocked softly. "Sir?" A handler called. Homelander's eyes flashed. The door opened anyway. A brave mistake. The handler walked in with a tablet. Edgar's meeting went. Homelander grabbed the tablet and crushed it in his hand like it was plastic. "I don't care about meetings," Homelander said, voice low. "I care about respect." The handler swallowed. "Yes, sir." Homelander leaned closer. His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I want them to come to me," he said. "Not a room, not a table. Me." The handler nodded quickly. "We're pushing the child story," he said. "Public anger is—" Homelander's eyes narrowed. "Good," he said. "Make it bigger." He turned toward the window, looking out at the city. "They think they're heroes," he whispered, "so we make hero work impossible." He smiled to himself. Then he spoke like he was giving an order to the air. "Bring the next kid," he said. Hank's cerebro was not a perfect dome with shining metal. It was a mess of wires, scavenged parts, stolen signal boosters, and one Vought drone module held together by Hank's patience and Frenchie's criminal talent. It sat on a folding table in a new hideout. The hideout smelled like oil and old laundry. Hank didn't care. He leaned over the device with careful hands, connecting a coil. Frenchie held a flashlight for him like a proud assistant. "You are like wizard scientist," Frenchie whispered. Hank didn't look up. "I am not a wizard," he said, then added, "though I appreciate the sentiment." John sat in a chair beside the table, eyes closed. Aurora sat behind her, hand lightly on her shoulder. Scott stood watch near the door. Logan sat on the floor, sharpening nothing, just making a sound that helped him think. Butcher watched Hank's work like a man watching a bomb technician. He kept tapping his foot, impatient, hungry for action. MM kept checking a map with safe routes marked in pen. Starlight stood near the window, hood up, phone in hand. She had started using it differently now. Less scrolling, more listening, more searching. Hank clicked a switch. The device hummed. A small light blinked. Hank's eyes widened with quiet pride. "Okay," he said. "Jean." John breathed in. Her face tightened. The hum changed slightly, as if it was responding to her. Huey held his breath without meaning to. Jean's brows drew together. Her voice came out thin. "I feel them," she whispered. Scott stepped closer. "How many?" he asked. Jean's lips parted. More than I want, she said. Hank swallowed. Focus on the strongest signals, he said gently. The ones most likely connected to the rift. Jean's hand gripped the armrest. There's one close, she said. A child. Scared. Hot. Rogue's head snapped. Hot? She asked. John's eyes opened, unfocused. Like light, she said. Like power that keeps spilling. Starlight's voice turned sharp. That sounds like Vought, she said. Pointed at the map. Where? He asked. Jean's finger lifted slowly, like it was heavy. She pointed toward a section of the city. Hank looked at Frenchie. Frenchie looked back like he already knew. That's near the clinic, Frenchie said quietly. The one with the smiling logo. Scott's jaw tightened. We go, he said. Butcher grinned. Now we're talking, he said. Aurora's voice was steady. We go to save children, she said, eyes on Butcher. Not to satisfy revenge. Butcher's grin didn't vanish, but it thinned. Sure, he said. Save children. Also, maybe punch a god. Scott didn't argue with the second part. He just said, in and out. No cameras if we can help it. Logan snorted. No promises, he muttered. Hank looked at him. Logan, he said, patient as a teacher. Try, at least, to avoid being a headline. Logan looked back. Tell them to stop filming, he said. Then he stood. The clinic looked like hope from the outside. Bright windows, soft music, a smiling nurse poster, a slogan about helping special people. Scott didn't trust it for 1 second. They approached from the back, through an alley where the lights were broken. and Frenchie moved first. They were human. They knew how to move like shadows. Scott followed with Aurora, Jean, and Rogue. Hank stayed close, carrying a small jammer. Logan brought up the rear, eyes scanning for motion. Starlight came too, hood low. Huey came because Huey couldn't stay behind when children were involved. He hated himself for that, but he did it anyway. Butcher came because Butcher never missed a chance to hurt Vought. Frenchie popped a lock on a service door. After you, he whispered, as if this was a fancy restaurant. They slipped inside. The hallway smelled like bleach and flowers. The lights were too white. Scott's skin crawled. They moved quietly. They avoided the front desk. They went deeper, where doors required keycards. Hank pulled out a small tool and a stolen card Frenchie had acquired. He swiped. The lock clicked. Paperwork, Hank whispered, not smiling. Logan muttered, "Don't start." They entered a room with computers and files. Starlight's face tightened as she scanned the screens. "This is real," she whispered. "They're tracking people. Names, symptoms, locations." Leaned over a monitor and hissed. "These are kids," he said, voice tight. "They're listing them like inventory." Rogue's hands clenched. "Where are they?" she demanded. Jean closed her eyes. "Downstairs," she said, voice strained. "I can hear them." Scott nodded once. "We move," he said. They found stairs. The air got colder as they went down. The smell changed from flowers to metal. At the bottom, a door had no window. A keypad beeped. Frenchie pulled out a small device, attached it, and waited. The lock opened. They stepped into a corridor lined with white doors. Behind some doors, there were sounds. Crying, whispers, small voices trying to be brave. Huey's throat closed. He wanted to run to every door and open them all. Scott's voice was low. "Slow," he said. "We don't know what's here." Aurora's eyes were dark. "We know enough," she said. They opened the first door. Inside was a child, maybe 10, sitting on a bed with wrists strapped to a rail. A thin band sat around his head, wires leading to a machine. He looked up, eyes wide. He saw Rogue and flinched, then saw Aurora and froze, then saw Starlight, and stared like he recognized her from TV. Jean stepped closer, gentle. "We're here to help," she said. The child's lips trembled. "Are you the invaders?" he whispered. Huey's heart broke. Scott crouched so he wasn't towering. "No," he said. "We're the ones getting you out." They unstrapped him. Rogue held him carefully, like she didn't trust herself to touch too long. She kept her gloves on. They opened the next door. Another kid. Then another. Some were quiet. Some were shaking. One had a light flickering from his palms, like sparks he couldn't control. Hank's eyes narrowed, and his voice went low. "This isn't just detention," he murmured. "They're testing." Frenchie found folders on a cart. He flipped one open and went pale. "Oh," he whispered. "Oh no." MM took the folder and read it. His face darkened. "What?" Scott asked. MM's voice turned rough. "They're mixing things," he said. "They got samples from your fight. They're putting it into people." Hank's stomach dropped. "That's reckless," he said, then corrected himself, colder. "And evil." A door at the end of the hall opened. Heavy footsteps. A man in a lab coat stepped out, looking down at a clipboard, not even worried. Then he looked up and saw them. His mouth opened to shout. Logan moved fast and covered the distance in a blink, slamming the man into the wall. Logan's claws popped out, stopping a hair from the man's throat. "Don't," Scott said, voice sharp. Logan's jaw flexed. He didn't cut. The man's eyes rolled back in fear. "Security," he choked out. "Security." Jean lifted a hand. The man's voice cut off. Not because she crushed his throat, because she held his jaw still. Her eyes were hard. "Where is the subject?" she asked. The man's eyes darted. Hank's voice was calm and terrifying in its own way. "Where's the test you made with our DNA?" Hank asked. The man's eyes went to the end of the hall again. A new sound came from behind that last door. A low, wet growl, like a person trying to breathe through a storm. Ororo's face tightened. "That is not a child," she said. Scott's voice was low. "Everyone back," he ordered. "Kids behind us. Now." Huey and Starlight guided the kids into the rooms they'd already cleared. Rogue stepped forward beside Scott, fists clenched. Logan released the scientist and turned, claws ready. Hank swallowed and held up the jammer. "If there are cameras," he said, "they won't have them for long." Butcher stepped into the hall too, gun raised, eyes bright with mean excitement. "Open the door," Butcher whispered. Scott didn't like the way he said it. Frenchie moved to the control panel by the door and tapped. The lock clicked. The door slid open. And something big stepped out. It was shaped like a man, but it moved wrong, like its body didn't agree on what it was. Skin marked with bruises and needle points, muscles too thick in some places, too thin in others. Veins dark. Its eyes were wide, unfocused, like it was trapped inside itself. It looked at them and made a sound that was part scream, part growl. Huey, peeking from a doorway, felt his whole body go cold. That wasn't a hero. That was a project. The thing lunged. It moved fast. Not Homelander fast, but faster than it should for its size. Scott fired an optic blast at the floor in front of it, trying to slow it, trying to redirect, trying to keep the hallway from becoming a slaughterhouse. The blast cracked the ground. The thing stumbled, then adjusted, like it learned from the impact in real time. It leapt over the broken floor and slammed into Scott. Scott flew back into the wall, air knocked from his lungs. Ororo's hand lifted. Wind hit the creature's side, pinning it against the opposite wall for half a second. Lightning snapped, controlled, small, not lethal, more like a stun. The creature screamed and shook it off. It turned toward Ororo. Rogue dashed forward and grabbed its wrist. Her glove touched skin. Rogue's eyes widened. Energy surged into her like fire and ice at once. She tried to pull away. The creature yanked back and threw her. Rogue slammed into the wall and slid down, gasping. Scott pushed himself up, visor aiming. Jean's telekinesis hit the creature and held it mid-step. It strained. It shook. It wasn't as strong as Homelander, but it was strong enough to fight her hold. Jean's face went pale. Hank's eyes widened. "It's adapting," he whispered. "It's—" The creature's eyes flicked to Jean. It smiled, wrong and empty. Then it moved its hand, and a burst of force slammed into Jean like a shove. Jean flew back, skidding across the floor. Huey's mouth fell open. "What the—" Starlight's face hardened. "It copied her," she whispered. Scott's blood ran cold, not because it was unbeatable, because Vought had made something that learned. Scott fired. A full optic blast, controlled but strong, slammed into the creature's chest and drove it back through the open door into its room. The blast shattered equipment. Sparks flew, glass broke, the creature roared. Scott moved forward, planting his feet like a soldier. Aurora stepped beside him. Her calm was gone now. In its place was cold focus. Logan darted in low, slashing at the creature's leg. Metal claws cut flesh. The creature screamed. Then it grabbed Logan's arm. Logan growled and tried to twist free. The creature's eyes narrowed, and suddenly its skin hardened in patches like armor. It slammed Logan into a table. Logan crashed through it. He popped back up, healing, furious. Butcher raised his gun and fired at the creature's head. The bullets hit the hardened patches and bounced. Butcher stared. "Oh, come on!" Hank grabbed him by the shoulder and yanked him back. "That will not help," Hank snapped. Butcher glared. "Then what will?" Hank's voice was tight. "Intelligence," he said, almost spitting the word. Rogue pushed herself up, breathing hard, eyes burning. "I can take it," she said, voice rough. Scott snapped. "No," because he saw the risk. Rogue could absorb power, yes, but not without cost. Not without drowning. Rogue wiped blood from her lip. "Scott," she growled. "I said I can take it." Aurora looked at Rogue and gave a small nod. Not approval of recklessness, approval of trust. John pushed herself up too, face pale, eyes hard. "I can hold it," she said. Short. Scott's mind worked fast. "Aurora," he said. "Contain the room. Keep it away from the hall." Aurora lifted both hands. The air in the doorway changed. Wind rushed in and formed a hard pressure wall at the edges, like invisible hands pushing inward. Debris stopped flying out. The fight became trapped inside the room. Scott turned to Rogue. "One touch," he said. "Then you pull away." Rogue's eyes narrowed. "I know how my power works," she snapped. Scott held her gaze. "Then trust me when I say you can drown," he said. Rogue's expression flickered. Anger, then fear she hated admitting, then a hard nod. Joan braced, hands trembling. Her telekinesis pinned the creature's shoulders. It fought her. It snarled. It twisted like an animal. Scott fired a smaller blast into its knee, dropping it. Logan lunged and drove his claws into the floor beside it, anchoring himself, ready to hold it down if it surged. "Now!" Scott shouted. Rogue sprinted in and grabbed the creature's face with both gloved hands, then ripped the gloves off in one motion. Skin to skin. The creature jerked. Rogue's eyes went wide. She gasped like she swallowed lightning. Energy surged into her. Information too, pain, confusion, rage, a mind chopped into pieces by chemicals, and fear. Rogue screamed. The creature screamed too, but weaker now. Rogue's body shook. Light flickered around her like a storm trapped under skin. Huey watched from the doorway, horrified. "She's gonna," he whispered. Jean's voice was strained. "Pull away," she hissed. Rogue didn't. Not yet. She held on, teeth clenched, tears in her eyes from the pressure. Scott stepped forward, heart pounding. "Rogue!" he shouted. Rogue's eyes met his, and Scott saw it. She was trying to save the creature too. Not just stop it. Save it. Scott's throat tightened. "Now," he said, quieter. "Please." Rogue jerked away. She stumbled back, shaking, breathing like she'd run miles. The creature dropped to its knees, weaker, arms trembling. It looked around like it didn't know where it was. Then it roared again and tried to stand. Scott fired. A blast hit the wall near it, not its body, collapsing debris in front of it like a barrier. Aurora's wind slammed the debris tighter, trapping it in the room without crushing it. Jean's telekinesis pushed the door shut. The lock clicked. The creature slammed into the door from the inside. The metal buckled. Hank's hand shook as he pulled wires from his pocket and connected them to the door controls. "Give me 10 seconds, Hank snapped. Butcher glared. "We don't have 10 seconds. "We do if you stop yelling at me," Hank shot back. Hank hit the jammer. The lights in the corridor flickered. A camera on the ceiling went dead. Then another. Hank's eyes stayed focused. "They won't see us," he murmured. "Not live." Scott's chest tightened. "They'll still know," he said. Starlight's voice was low. "They always know," she said. Sirens began to wail above them. Security was coming. Scott looked at the doors down the hall. The kids, the small faces, the shaking hands. He made a decision. "We take them," he said. "All of them." MM nodded instantly. "Yeah," he said. "We're not leaving kids." Butcher looked like he wanted to argue, then stopped. Even he had a line. Huey swallowed hard. "How?" he asked. Aurora stepped forward. "Carefully," she said. They moved fast. Huey helped guide children. Starlight took 2 at a time, using her light to keep the hallway bright and calm. MM carried one small boy who couldn't walk right. Frenchie carried a girl who clung to his neck like she was drowning. Rogue staggered, but stayed upright. Logan stayed close to her without saying a word. John held her head like it hurt. Aurora stayed near her again, steady hand on her shoulder when they had half a second. Hank grabbed files from the cart as they passed. He shoved them into a bag. Scott saw him. "Hank," he warned. Hank's voice was tight. "Evidence," he said. "We need something that is not a story." Scott didn't argue. He just said, "Move." They found a service exit. Frenchie opened it. Cold air hit them as they stepped into a back alley. A van waited at the end of the alley, one of the boys' vehicles, already positioned. MM threw the door open. "In," he shouted. Kids climbed in, helped by Huey and Starlight. Scott looked back toward the building. He could feel the fight they didn't finish. The creature slamming against a door, the sirens getting closer. Aurora's face was tight. "We can't stay," she said. Scott nodded. They piled into the van. Butcher jumped in last, slamming the door. Frenchie hit the gas. They tore out of the alley just as armed security rounded the corner behind them. Scott saw the clinic logo flash past the window. Hope on the outside, a cage on the inside. Back at the hideout, the kids sat on blankets and stared at everything like they were expecting the walls to grab them. Huey offered water with shaking hands. Some kids took it. Some didn't trust it. Starlight crouched in front of a boy whose hands kept flickering with sparks. She spoke softly, trying to be gentle in a way she wasn't used to being. Aurora moved among them like a quiet anchor. She didn't make big speeches. She just stayed close and made them feel less alone. Hank dumped the bag of files onto the table. Scott stood over them, visor aimed down, reading. Names, ages. Notes. Power onset after anomaly exposure. Subject exhibits spontaneous energy discharge. Subject suitable for integration trial. Scott's stomach turned. Hank's voice was low. "They're calling the rift an anomaly, like it's a storm," he said. "But they're treating it like a mine." Jean sat heavily in a chair and pressed 2 fingers to her temple. "They're scared," she whispered. "The kids, they keep expecting pain." Rogue leaned against the wall, arms folded, trying not to shake. "Who was that thing?" she asked. Hank swallowed. "A person," he said quietly. "A person turned into a test." Butcher scoffed. "A weapon," he corrected. Aurora's eyes snapped to him. "No," she said. "A person." Butcher held her gaze, then looked away with a grunt. Scott stared at the files. "Vought staged the kidnapping story," he said. "And they're doing this in secret." Starlight's voice was bitter. "Not that secret," she said. "They hide it behind smiles." Leaned in. "We got kids out," he said. "That's good." Scott nodded. "It is," he said. Then Hank's device on the table, his rough, messy cerebro, hummed. A new pulse ran through it. Jun stiffened, her eyes opened wide. Scott turned. "Jun?" he asked. Jean's voice came out thin. "The rift," she whispered. "It's louder." Hank's eyes widened. "That's impossible," he said, then corrected himself. "That's unexpected." Logan's head snapped up, his nostrils flared. "Someone's here," Logan said. Scott's heart pounded. "Vought?" he asked. Logan shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "Not them." Aurora stepped forward, her posture shifting into readiness. The air around her felt charged, like the room itself held its breath. The hum from Hank's device rose. The lights flickered. A pressure built in the corner of the room, as if space was getting squeezed. The kids began to whimper. Huey backed up. "What is that?" he whispered. Jean stood, trembling. "It's opening," she said. Then the corner of the room split, not like a door, like a tear. A jagged line of light ripped through the air, bright and harsh. The smell that came out was wrong, metal and ozone and cold stone. Wind rushed inward, pulling loose papers off the table. Hank grabbed for them and failed. The tear widened, and something moved inside it. A shape stepped through. A man. Tall. Still. He wore dark clothing that looked heavy, like it was made to survive war. A helmet covered his head, smooth and hard, hiding his eyes. He didn't look confused. He didn't look scared. He looked like he arrived on purpose. Behind him, 2 more figures stepped through the tear. Shadows of people, not clearly seen, but standing with quiet confidence. The tear snapped shut. Silence filled the room for half a second. Then the papers on the table lifted, not blown by wind. Lifted. They rose into the air in a slow spiral, like invisible hands were turning them. Huey's mouth opened. Starlight's eyes widened. Butcher's grin vanished. Metal in the room trembled. A loose nail in the wall slid out like it was being pulled by a magnet. Jean took 1 step back, face pale. Scott's chest went tight, like someone grabbed his lungs. He knew that helmet. He knew the feeling of the air when this man entered a room. Logan's voice came out as a low growl, full of old hate and old history. "Eric," Logan said. The helmeted man turned his head slightly, as if he heard his name through a wall. His voice was calm, deep, certain. "Logan," he said. Scott's throat went dry. Butcher looked between them, confused and irritated. "Who the hell is that?" he demanded. Scott didn't want to answer, because answering made it real. But the name slipped out anyway, heavy as a stone. "Magneto," Scott said. The helmeted man took 1 slow step forward. The metal in the room sang quietly, like it was waking up. He looked at the children on the blankets. He looked at Starlight, at Butcher, at Huey, humans with fear in their eyes. Then he looked at Scott and Aurora and Jean and Rogue. His voice stayed calm. "This world is loud," he said, "and it is cruel." His head tilted slightly. and I can already smell who runs it." Butcher's hand tightened on his gun. Aurora's eyes narrowed. "Why are you here?" she asked. Magneto's helmet faced her. "To end this," he said simply. Scott's voice was tight. "And what?" he asked, even though he feared the answer. Magneto's mouth curled just a little. "The lie," he said. Then his gaze shifted toward the covered window, toward the city outside, and the people who profit from our suffering. Scott felt the room tilt into a new kind of danger. Not drones, not cameras, not a staged trap, a storm with a mind. And the worst part was this. Scott knew Magneto meant every word. Scott didn't move when Magneto stepped forward. He kept his body between the new arrival and the children on the blankets. The room felt smaller now. Not because Magneto was loud, because he was certain. Metal in the corners trembled. A loose screw rolled across the floor on its own. One of the kids gasped and scooted back. Logan's shoulders were tight. His hands flexed at his sides, like his claws wanted to come out without asking. Aurora's eyes stayed calm, but her stance shifted. She was ready to put herself between a storm and a town. Jean swallowed hard. Her head still hurt from the clinic. Now it hurt in a different way. Magneto's mind felt like iron doors closing. Butcher stared like he was watching a new kind of bomb. "So," he said slowly, "you're another one of their mates." Magneto's helmet turned toward him. His voice stayed low and even. "I'm not anyone's mate," he said. Butcher almost smiled. "Good," he said. "Then we'll get along." Scott's voice cut in, sharp. "We don't," he said. Magneto looked back at Scott. The air felt heavy between them, full of old arguments that didn't belong in this world, but showed up anyway. "You brought children into hiding," Magneto said, glancing at the blankets. "You rescued them." Scott didn't soften. "We did," he said. Magneto nodded once, like that was a point in Scott's favor. "And they hunted you for it," he said. Huey's mouth was dry. He whispered almost to himself. "He talks like he's already won." Starlight heard him. She didn't answer. She just watched Magneto, trying to decide if he was a hero or the start of the end. Magneto's gaze moved to the stack of files on the table. Papers, names, notes. His voice stayed calm. "This world runs on cages," he said. "It calls them clinics, contracts, laws." He looked back at Scott. "There is only one language it respects," he said. Scott's jaw tightened. "No," he said. "Not here. Not like that." Magneto stepped closer. The screws in the wall pulled out farther. A chair leg squealed across the floor by itself. The kids flinched. Aurora's voice was steady. "Eric," she said, a warning wrapped in a name. Magneto paused. For half a second, his expression softened at hearing her voice. Then it hardened again. "I am not here to debate philosophy," he said. "I am here because you are surrounded by liars and killers." He looked toward the covered window, toward the city. "And because their center is made of metal and glass," he said. "A tower they worship." Butcher leaned forward, almost excited. "Vought Tower," he said. "Yeah, that's the one." Scott pointed his visor at Butcher. "No," he said again. Butcher rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on," he said. "Your mate's got the right idea," Logan growled. "He's not my mate," he snapped. Magneto's voice stayed calm. "They will come here," he said. "They will take these children back. They will take more." Jean's hands curled into fists. She could feel the truth in that. She could also feel how much Magneto wanted to turn that truth into a weapon. Scott's voice was tight but controlled. "We move them," Scott said. "We keep them safe. We don't bring a war down on them." Magneto tilted his head. "War is already here," he said. Scott didn't blink. "Then we end it without becoming monsters," he said. Magneto's mouth curved slightly, not a smile. "That is the line they taught you to love," he said. "So you will lose politely." Aurora stepped closer, her voice firm. "No," she said. "We will not lose. But we will not slaughter cities to win." Magneto looked at her for a long moment. Something old and respectful lived in that look. Then he turned away. "Very well," he said. "Do it your way." But his tone made it clear what he meant. "You will learn." He walked toward the door. The metal stopped trembling as he passed, like it was obeying him without question. Logan stepped in front of him, blocking the path. "You're not doing this here," Logan said. Magneto stopped, helmet inches from Logan's face. Then, with a small movement of Magneto's hand, Logan's belt buckle snapped. The metal clasp pulled tight. Logan's arms pinned against his sides for one sharp second. Not enough to hurt him, enough to remind him. Magneto's voice stayed soft. "You are brave," he said to Logan, "but you are not the solution." Then the buckle loosened. Logan stumbled forward, free, furious. Scott's voice rose. "Eric!" he snapped. Magneto didn't turn back. "Keep your children hidden," he said. "Keep your hands clean." He paused at the door. "And when they come for you again," he added, "remember that mercy does not impress predators." He left. The room breathed again, slowly, like it had been underwater. Butcher exhaled and grinned like a man who just found a bigger match. "Now," he said, "things get fun." Aurora's eyes snapped to him. "No," she said, cold. "They get dangerous." John sat down hard, face pale. "He's going to hit Vought," she whispered. Scott stared at the door Magneto had left through. "Yes," Scott said. And the worst part was this. Scott could already see the headlines. This world didn't need proof. It needed a story. And Magneto was about to hand them one. 2 weeks later, Scott measured time in safe routes, not days. They moved the children 3 times, then 4. They placed them in basements of people Vought didn't see, in apartments above small shops, in empty rooms behind locked doors. Starlight became the bridge. She knew which church group would help, which community center kept spare blankets, which nurses hated Vought enough to lie. Huey learned how to be quiet. It was not natural for him, but he learned. Set rules like a parent who didn't want to be a parent. No windows, no phones near the kids, no talking outside, no panicking. Frenchie kept finding supplies from places no one asked questions about. Kimiko made kids laugh without saying a word. She'd do a small, silly dance. Or she'd pull a face, and the kids would giggle, surprised they still could. Aurora took small walks at night and watched the streets. She'd stop at corners where people looked hungry or scared, not to pose, not to preach, just to help. A quiet wind would push smoke away from an old man coughing. A sudden gentle rain would put out a trash fire near an apartment building. Scott tried not to let anyone see him do it, but he still did it. Because if he didn't, what was he? Hank and John rebuilt the detector again. Better, cleaner, less buzzing. Hank hated that his Cerebro looked like a pile of junk. He also hated that it worked anyway. Every time he added a part, Butcher slid another set of papers across the table. "Sign here," Butcher would say. Hank would glare like the papers were snakes. Logan would tear one in half. Hank would sigh and tape it back together. It became a stupid routine that somehow kept them sane. And in the middle of all that, Magneto became a shadow over the city. He didn't announce himself on TV. He didn't give speeches on rooftops. He did something worse. He hit Vought where it hurt. A Vought convoy vanished on a bridge, metal doors torn open like they were cardboard. A lab shipment never arrived. A private security team was found pinned to a wall by their own rifles. No one died on camera, but everyone felt the message. Vought called it terror. The internet called it justice. And Homelander smiled wider in every public appearance, like smiling could fill the cracks. Scott watched the city's fear grow, while the kids in his care learned new ways to flinch. He hated that. Then the message arrived. Not to his phone. Not in an email. Vought didn't play that clean. It arrived as an envelope slid under a door at a safe house they had already abandoned. Inside was a single card, a place, a time, and one sentence. You can go home. Hank stared at the card like it was a trap and a miracle at the same time. Jean's mouth went dry. She didn't speak. She just looked at Scott, and Scott saw it. Home was not a place right now. It was the idea of breathing without lying. Scott folded the card and put it in his pocket. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. Because a choice like that could split a team in half if he said it wrong. Stan Edgar chose a smaller room for the second meeting. Not out of humility, out of control. No big table. No plate of food. No fake friendliness. Only one chair on each side. He sat first, hands folded. Scott entered alone. He didn't like that. He did it anyway. He kept his visor on. He stood, not sitting, so he wouldn't feel like a guest. Edgar watched him with calm eyes. "Mr. Summers," he said. Scott's voice was flat. "You sent a card," he said. Edgar nodded once. "It was effective," he said. "Scott didn't play games." "You said you could help us go home," he said. Edgar leaned back slightly. "Yes," he said. "I can." Scott's chest tightened. "Then stop hunting us," he said. "Stop lying. Stop taking children." Edgar's face didn't change. "Those are separate negotiations," he said. Scott felt anger flicker. He controlled it. "You can't bargain with children," Scott said. Edgar's voice stayed calm. "I can bargain with anything," he said. "You simply dislike how I do it." Scott took a breath. "What do you want?" he asked. Edgar slid a folder across the table. Scott didn't touch it. Edgar spoke anyway. "Registration," he said. "Controlled appearances. A legal identity. A narrative that benefits the public." Scott's voice hardened. "You mean that benefits you?" he said. Edgar didn't deny it. "Stability benefits everyone," he said. Scott's visor angled slightly. "You made that thing in the clinic," he said. "You made Project Chimera." For the first time, Edgar's eyes sharpened. "You use internal names," he said. Scott didn't answer. He let the silence accuse. Edgar exhaled, small. "Project Chimera is an early prototype," he said. "It is being refined." Scott felt sick. "It was a person," he said. Edgar's voice stayed even. "It was an asset," he corrected. Scott's hands clenched. He forced them to loosen. "You want to own us," Scott said. Edgar looked at him calmly. "I want to keep this world from tearing itself apart," he said. Scott almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. "You're tearing it apart," he said. Edgar tapped the folder. "We can help you return," he said. "Or you can stay illegal and watch your people suffer." Scott's voice turned cold. "They're not my people," he said, then corrected himself because it was true in a way he didn't want. "The children are my responsibility. The public is not your property." Edgar's eyes didn't blink. "This is not your world," he said softly. "You do not understand it." Scott leaned forward a little. "I understand this," he said. "You're scared because we weren't made by you." Edgar held his gaze. "Fear is useful," he said. "It is a tool." Scott straightened. "We're not signing," he said. Edgar's tone stayed calm, but it turned harder. "Then you will lose," he said. Scott's voice stayed steady. "Then we'll lose doing the right thing," he said. "And you'll still be wrong." He turned to leave. Edgar spoke one last time. "If you want to go home," he said, "you will need a doorway." Scott paused. Edgar continued. The anomaly is becoming unstable. It is opening in more places. Scott's blood chilled. Because of Magneto, he said. Edgar didn't confirm. He didn't deny. He simply said, because reality doesn't like being touched. Scott walked out with the card still in his pocket and a heavier weight in his chest. He knew what Edgar was doing. He was offering a leash made of home, and leashes were the one thing the X-Men were born to break. Butcher waited until night to bring his own offer. He caught Logan alone on a rooftop because Butcher was good at finding the moment when a person's guard was not fully up. The city below them glowed with screens and sirens. Logan leaned on the ledge, arms crossed, eyes narrowed at the streets like he wanted to fight the whole world. Butcher stepped beside him with a cigarette he didn't light. He only held it like a prop. "You hate him," Butcher said. Logan didn't look at him. "A lot of people," Logan said. Butcher snorted. "The flying one," he said. "Homelander." Logan's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he said. Butcher leaned closer, voice low. "You want to know what he is?" he asked. "He's a bully with god muscles, and bullies only understand one thing." Logan finally looked at him. "What?" he asked, even though he didn't like where this was going. Butcher smiled, thin and sharp. "Pain," he said. "Permanent." Logan's eyes narrowed. "You want me to kill him," he said. Butcher shrugged like it was obvious. "I want him gone," he said. "You're the closest thing I've seen to someone who can get close and keep getting back up." Logan stared at him for a long moment. Then he said, "No." Butcher blinked. "No?" Logan's voice stayed low. "I'm not your knife," he said. "I don't do jobs for guys like you." Butcher's face hardened. "Guys like me?" he said. Logan's gaze stayed steady. "Guys who pretend this is about justice," he said, "when it's about satisfaction." Butcher's jaw clenched. "He killed my wife," he said, voice sharp, shaking at the edges. Logan didn't flinch. "Then hate him," Logan said. "But don't ask me to become you." Butcher stared, eyes burning. Then he laughed once, bitter. "You're all the same," he said. "Rules, rules, rules." Logan stepped closer, voice rough. "Rules are the only thing that keep us from becoming monsters," he said. Butcher looked away toward the city, where Homelander's face smiled from a billboard. "Monsters run this place," Butcher muttered. Logan's voice softened just a little. "Then don't give them more," he said. Butcher didn't answer, but he didn't leave. Not yet, because he still believed he could use the next disaster, and the next disaster was already coming. Homelander chose the stage. He always chose the stage. He announced a unity rally outside Vote Tower. He called it a show of strength and calm. He said the city should not fear. The crowd came because the screens told them to, because fear is easier when it's shared. Huge lights pointed up at the sky. Drones hovered in formation like metal birds. Vought banners hung from buildings like flags. Scott watched from a rooftop 2 blocks away. He had Aurora beside him, John behind them, crouched with eyes closed, feeling the mines below like a sea. Hank sat near a vent, wiring a small device into a nearby broadcast box with Frenchie's help. The plan was simple and dangerous. If they could get the clinic files on a live feed, even for 30 seconds, it could crack the story Vought was selling. MM and Huey guided civilians away from likely danger zones, pretending it was just traffic. Starlight had slipped into the crowd, hood up, trying to be close to Maeve. Maeve was there, standing near the stage with her tired eyes and stiff posture. She looked like someone wearing armor made of regret. Scott didn't like the plan. He had agreed anyway, because the alternative was letting Vote right the world forever. Jean's eyes snapped open. Scott turned. "What?" he asked. Jean's voice was thin. "He's here," she whispered. Scott's stomach sank. "Homelander?" he asked. Jean shook her head slowly. "No," she said. "Eric." Scott's breath caught. Aurora's eyes hardened. "Where?" she asked. John pointed, not with a finger, but with her gaze. Down the street, beyond the stage lights, a row of parked cars shuddered. A metal street sign bent like it was being pulled by invisible hands. Then the air changed again. Not weather. Pressure. The crowd began to murmur. Homelander stood at the podium, smiling wide, voice booming through speakers. "My fellow Americans," he said, "we will not be intimidated." But the podium vibrated. Homelander paused, still smiling, but his eyes flicked down. The microphones bent. The metal in the stand twisted. Homelander's smile tightened. He tried to laugh it off. "Looks like we need better equipment," he joked. The crowd chuckled, nervous. Then the streetlights went out in a straight line, one after another, like someone flicked switches. A sound rose from the crowd. Confusion. Fear. John whispered, "He's making an entrance." Scott's jaw clenched. "He's making a statement," he said. A block away, a man stepped into the open. He wore the helmet. He didn't float. He didn't pose. He simply walked forward, and the metal around him woke up. The crowd screamed as cars slid sideways on their own, not crashing into people, not exploding, just moving, like toys. Magneto raised one hand. A wave of metal rose from the street. Bolts, rebar, scraps, signs, forming a twisting shape above him like a giant claw made of the city. Homelander's smile vanished. For 1 second, pure anger showed on his face. Then he forced the smile back for the cameras. "This is exactly what I was talking about," Homelander shouted. "A terrorist attack!" Magneto's voice carried without a mic, calm, clear. "This company steals children," Magneto said. The crowd hesitated. Homelander laughed, loud. "Lies!" he shouted. Magneto pointed toward Vought Tower. The metal claw above him shifted, aimed like a weapon. "You built a world where power is owned," Magneto said. "I am here to break your chains." Homelander's eyes flashed red. Scott tensed. Aurora's hand lifted, ready. Jean's face went tight. And down in the crowd, Starlight watched Maeve's jaw clench. Maeve whispered, barely moving her lips. "He's going to snap." Starlight whispered back, "We can't let him." On the rooftop, Hank's hands shook as he finished connecting wires. Frenchie hissed, "Now, Professor, now." Hank swallowed. "Not yet," he said. "If we go now, the feed gets buried under the attack." Scott heard it all, but his eyes were locked on Magneto. Magneto raised his hand higher. The metal claw surged forward toward Vought Tower, not at the crowd, at the building. But buildings did not exist alone. They existed with people inside. Scott made his choice. "Aurora," he said. "Evacuation wins. Now." Aurora's eyes flashed. She lifted both hands. Wind swept through the nearby streets, not violent, not a hurricane. A strong, steady push that guided people away from the tower's base and away from the stage. People stumbled, confused, but they moved. June whispered, "Scott." Scott's voice was sharp. "We stop him without killing anyone," he said. Logan was already moving down the fire escape. Rogue followed him, jaw set. Scott jumped down after them, landing hard, sprinting toward the street. The crowd screamed as Homelander lifted off the stage and shot toward Magneto like a missile. Heat vision fired, 2 red beams slicing through the air. Magneto didn't dodge like a normal man. He lifted his hand. A wall of metal ripped up from the street in a tight sheet, blocking the beams. The beams carved glowing lines into the metal and died. Homelander roared and punched through the wall anyway, shattering it like glass. Metal shards flew. Aurora's wind caught them and flung them upward, away from civilians. Homelander grabbed Magneto by the chest. Magneto didn't flinch. He raised 2 fingers, and Homelander's cape clasp snapped. The metal belt on Homelander's suit tightened like a snake. Homelander jerked, startled, angry. Scott arrived close enough to feel the heat of it all. He shouted, "Eric, stop!" Magneto's helmet turned slightly. He saw Scott. He did not stop. He raised his hand again. The metal around Vought Tower groaned. The building's outer frame trembled. People inside screamed at windows. Scott's stomach turned. He fired an optic blast, not at Magneto, but at the metal structure connecting to the tower's lower signage, snapping it free so it couldn't act like a lever. Logan lunged in, claws out, slashing at the metal belt on Homelander, trying to free him, not to help Homelander, but because a trapped Homelander was a bomb. Homelander kicked Logan away mid-air, furious. Logan slammed into the street and got up again, snarling. Rogue grabbed a fallen metal pole and hurled it away from the crowd, then rushed toward Magneto, hands up. "Don't!" Scott shouted. Rogue didn't listen. She went for Magneto's arm. Magneto flicked his wrist. A ring of metal bolts snapped around Rogue's boots, pinning her to the pavement. Rogue cursed and yanked, muscles straining. Jean arrived and threw up a telekinetic shield between the main fight and the fleeing civilians, catching shockwaves, catching debris, catching fear. Her face was pale. Her voice was tight. "Scott, if I push him too hard, I know," Scott said. "Stay defensive." Magneto's voice rose, calm and deadly. "Look at them," he said, gesturing toward Vought Tower. "They built a cage and called it a home." Homelander's eyes blazed. "Shut up," he screamed. Heat vision fired again, wild now, sweeping. Jean caught it and bent it upward, but the effort made her knees shake. Aurora's wind shoved smoke away and kept civilians moving. MM and Huey dragged a couple away who had fallen. Huey looked up at Scott, panic in his eyes, and shouted, "You said you weren't invaders." Scott yelled back, "We're not." "He's not listening!" That was the worst truth. Not every mutant listened to the X-Men. Not every powerful person wanted peace. And Vought was counting on that. On the rooftop, Hank shouted into his radio, "Now!" even though no one was on the other end but Frenchie. Frenchie hit the final switch. The giant screens behind Homelander's stage flickered. Homelander's face froze mid-scream on the big display. Then the image changed. A clinic hallway, white doors, kids on beds, straps, names on file folders. A close shot of a form, integration trial. The crowd went silent like someone cut the sound. Hank's voice played over the speakers, shaky but clear. "These are children," Hank said. "Vought is not saving them. Vought is studying them. Vought is taking them." The crowd's heads turned, confused, horrified. For half a second, the story broke. Starlight saw it from inside the crowd. People stopped chanting. People started asking questions. Maeve's eyes widened slightly. Not hope. Not yet. But something cracked. Homelander noticed the screens. His face twisted. Not because he cared about kids, because he cared about control. He shot upward and turned toward the stage, toward the screens, toward the cameras. His eyes glowed. Jean felt it before it happened. She shouted, "Scott!" Scott snapped his head. Homelander fired heat vision straight at the big screens. The beams hit, and the screens exploded in sparks and broken glass. The proof vanished. The crowd screamed again. Homelander forced his smile back and shouted into the chaos, "Deep fake! Terrorist hack! Don't believe it!" The spell of silence broke. The fear rushed back in. Vought security surged forward. Black-clad teams moved to contain the crowd and protect them, which meant pushing them and pointing guns. And in the middle of it, Magneto laughed once. Low, bitter. You see, Magneto said to Scott, truth doesn't matter. Only force. Scott's voice was tight. Truth mattered for a second, he said. And we can make it matter again. Magneto's hand lifted higher. The tower groaned louder. Scott made his final call. "Aurora!" Scott shouted. "Full containment on the tower frame! Keep it from falling!" Aurora's eyes widened. "Scott!" "Do it," Scott said. "Please!" Aurora lifted both hands, and the air around the tower shifted. Pressure changed. Wind surged upward along the building's sides like invisible supports. It would not stop metal bending, but it could slow collapse. It could buy seconds. Seconds saved lives. Jean stepped closer to Scott, trembling. "I can push him," she said, "but I can't do it gently." Scott looked at her. "Don't go into his mind," he said. "Just his movement." Jean nodded, tears in her eyes from strain. "Okay," she whispered. Jean's telekinesis hit Magneto like a strong shove. Magneto stumbled one step. It wasn't much, but it was the first time he had been forced to move. Magneto turned his helmet toward her. For 1 second, something like respect flashed. Then steel rods rose from the street like spears, aiming toward Jean. Scott fired a wide optic blast, not at the rod's ends, but at their base, blasting the ground so they lost their straight line and fell sideways. Logan lunged, slashing through a falling rod to keep it from hitting a fleeing person. Rogue ripped free of the bolts around her boots with a furious scream and ran straight at Magneto again. "Rogue, no!" Scott shouted. Rogue didn't stop. She grabbed Magneto's forearm with bare skin. Magneto's body stiffened. Rogue's eyes went wide. She absorbed. Not his power fully. No one fully absorbed Magneto like that without consequence, but enough to pull some of his strength, enough to disrupt his control for a heartbeat. Magneto's metal claw above the street wavered. The tower frame stopped groaning for one brief moment. Scott seized it. He sprinted forward and slammed his shoulder into Rogue's side, pulling her away before she drowned in it. Rogue fell back, shaking, gasping, eyes wild. "I had him!" she rasped. Scott's voice was rough. "You had 1 second," he said. "And I'm not losing you for 1 second." Magneto's helmet turned toward Scott again. And in that second, Homelander struck. He flew down like a meteor and slammed both fists into Magneto's chest. The impact cracked the street. Magneto flew backward. Homelander hovered above him, breathing hard, eyes burning. "Mine!" Homelander screamed, pointing at the city, at the crowd, at the tower. "This is mine!" Scott felt his skin crawl. That wasn't patriotism. That was ownership. Homelander grabbed Magneto by the helmet and lifted him. Magneto's gloved hand rose. Metal around Homelander's boots tightened again, trying to trap him. Homelander roared and yanked harder. Jean saw it. She saw the line they were about to cross. If Homelander tore the helmet off, Magneto could die, or Magneto could lose control, or both. If Magneto panicked, the tower could come down. Scott shouted, "Logan!" Logan launched himself upward, grabbed Homelander's ankle and yanked. Homelander kicked him away. Logan flew, hit the pavement, got up again, furious and unbroken. Aurora shouted, voice steady but strained, "Scott, the tower." Scott looked. The wind was holding as much as it could, but the metal frame was still twisting, still threatening. He made a choice he hated. He aimed his visor at the tower's lower metal supports Vought had reinforced with steel. If he shattered them wrong, it would collapse faster. If he shattered them right, he could drop the tension and let Aurora's wind stabilize the rest. Scott took a breath. One clean blast. The support snapped, not exploding outward, but collapsing inward in a controlled way. The tower stopped groaning as loudly. The stress line shifted. Aurora's wind surged, catching the sway. People inside screamed less as the building steadied. Scott's knees almost buckled from relief. He turned back just as Magneto lifted a hand toward Homelander's face. Homelander's eyes flared red. Joan stepped forward. She did not reach into Homelander's mind. She did not fix him. She did the only thing she could do without becoming a thief. She grabbed the air in front of his eyes with her telekinesis and bent his line of sight upward. Homelander's heat vision fired and carved a glowing line into the sky instead of into a crowd. Homelander froze, furious, confused. Scott shouted, "Now! Everyone out!" Starlight, in the crowd, raised her hands and blasted a bright wave of light, not to attack, but to make people look away from the fight and run. Maeve stepped forward, grabbed a security guard by the vest, and snarled, "Move them!" The guard obeyed, because Maeve was still a symbol, and symbols had weight. MM and Huey kept pulling people out of danger. Frenchie and Kimiko guided kids, who had wandered too close back into side streets. And in the chaos, Magneto did the one thing Scott feared most. He made a choice, not to kill, not to surrender, to leave before he could be contained. Metal rose around him like a closing flower. A shell of street signs, car doors, and broken scaffolding wrapped him in a spinning shield. Scott fired at it, trying to break it. The blast shattered some pieces, but the shield kept moving. The shield rolled backward into an alley like a giant metal wheel. Then it split apart. Magneto was gone. Scott stood breathing hard, visor scratched, hands shaking. Homelander hovered above the street, staring at the empty alley like it insulted him. His smile was gone now. Cameras were still on. He forced the smile back, but it looked like it hurt. He pointed at Scott. "You," Homelander said, loud enough for every mic. "You did this." Scott didn't answer. He didn't have time. Because Vote security was closing in, and the crowd was still panicking, and the story machine was already rewriting the moment. Hank's feed hack had lasted 26 seconds. 26 seconds of truth. Then the screens broke. Now, Vought would say it was fake, and many people would believe it. But not everyone. Scott saw it in small things. A woman in the crowd staring at the broken screens, face confused. Not angry. Confused. A man pulling his child closer and whispering, "Maybe it's not what they said." A crack. Not a victory. A crack. Scott grabbed his team and pulled them into the night. They vanished into alleys and rooftops and blind spots, because that was their new routine now. Not parades, not applause, just work. Real work. In the dark. A week later, the city looked the same on the outside. Screens still smiled. Vought still stood tall. Homelander still flew over parades like a flag with a face. But things under the surface had shifted. Not enough to topple a company. Enough to change a few choices. Some nurses stopped calling the hotline. Some cops looked the other way. Some people left a door unlocked when a stranger knocked quietly and asked for help. In the safe house, Hank sat at the table with the remaining clinic files spread out. He hated paper. He hated contracts. But he loved evidence. He tapped the top page with a pencil. "We need to distribute copies," he said. "Not online. They can erase that. Physical copies. Many." Frenchie grinned. "Ah," he said. "Paperwork. The true villain returns." Logan reached for the stack. Hank snapped, "Do not tear it." Logan paused, then slowly pulled his hand back like a child caught near a cookie jar. Rogue smirked, still pale from the rally. "Look at you," she said. "Learning." Logan grunted. "Don't get used to it." Jean sat by the window, watching the street through the curtain crack. Her face looked tired in a way sleep didn't fix. Scott stepped beside her. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Jean shook her head. "I'm not broken," she said. "I'm just angry." Scott nodded. "Me too," he said. Jean's voice softened. "He asked me," she whispered. Scott stiffened. "Who?" he asked. Jean didn't have to say the name. The flying one, she said. Scott's jaw tightened. What did he ask? He asked. Jean's eyes stayed on the street. He wanted me to make people love him, she said, to make it easy. Scott's voice was low and cold. And you said, no, he said. Jean nodded. I said no, she whispered. And he looked at me like I stole something. Aurora stepped into the room and heard the last part. Her voice was steady. You did the right thing, she said. Jean let out a breath, like she'd been holding it for days. Scott looked at Aurora. Any sign of Eric? He asked. Aurora's gaze turned distant. Not close, she said. But he is still in this city. Scott nodded. That meant they were living with two disasters, Vought and Magneto. Then the small Cerebro device hummed again. Hank looked up. Another rift echo, he said. Scott's stomach tightened. Where? He asked. Hank pointed at the map. Near Vought's research wing, he said. Jean swallowed. It's like the seam is hooked on them, she said. Hank nodded slowly. They are poking it, he said. They are trying to open it on purpose. Scott's face went hard. Then we stop that, he said. Butcher, sitting in the corner like a shadow with a smile, spoke without looking up. And if we can't? He asked. Scott turned. Then we contain it, he said. We collapse it. We make sure no one else gets dragged here. Butcher snorted. And you stay trapped, he said. Scott didn't flinch. If that's the cost, he said. Huey, carrying a box of supplies, froze in the doorway. You'd stay? Huey asked, voice small. Scott looked at him. He thought of the kids on blankets, the fear in their eyes, the way Vought had already marked them. He thought of his own world, of Xavier, of a home he might never see again. Then he thought of what it meant to leave people behind in a world like this. Scott's voice stayed steady. We don't leave children in cages, he said. Huey's eyes watered. He looked away fast so no one would see. Starlight stepped in behind him. She didn't say anything. She just nodded once, like she understood. Night fell again. Aurora stood on a rooftop with Logan. The city spread below them like a living map of light and noise. Logan leaned on the ledge, arms crossed, watching a Vought drone drift by in the distance. World's rotten, Logan muttered. Aurora's voice was soft. Yes, she said. Logan glanced at her. You still think it can change? He asked. Aurora watched the street below, where a woman quietly handed a blanket to a child and then walked away without looking for praise. I think people can change, Aurora said, even in a rotten world. Logan snorted. What about him? He asked, nodding toward a billboard where Homelander smiled. Aurora's gaze didn't flinch. Some people will not, she said, but that does not decide what we become. Logan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Kid smiled today. Aurora looked at him. Logan scratched the back of his neck like it embarrassed him. One of the Sparks kids, he muttered. He laughed when Frenchie burned the toast. Aurora's lips curved slightly. Good, she said. Below them, the city kept moving. Sirens, cars, screens, life going on. Different now. Logan grunted. Hank's gonna make us sign more papers, he said. Aurora's small smile grew. Yes, she said. Logan groaned. That's the real villain, he muttered. Aurora looked out at the skyline and spoke quietly, like she was speaking to the night itself. This world worships power, she said. We do not. Logan followed her gaze. In the distance, Vought Tower stood tall. It looked unchanged. It looked untouchable. But somewhere inside, a seam in reality was humming. And somewhere below, children slept in safety for the first time in weeks. Aurora took a slow breath. We are not their brand, she said, Logan's voice was low. "Then what are we?" he asked. Aurora watched the city and answered simply. "We're the ones who show up," she said. A Vought drone drifted closer, scanning. Logan tensed. Aurora lifted a hand slightly. A small gust of wind nudged the drone off course, gentle and quiet, like a hand turning a page. The drone moved on, unaware. Logan exhaled. Aurora didn't look proud. She didn't look tired. She looked steady. The city kept running its story. But now, somewhere in its shadows, a different story existed too. Not loud, not famous, just real. And that was enough to scare the people who thought they owned everything.